Now, I know we're all a bit sleepy, so we'll take you on a little bit of a journey. We're going to take our minds on a joyful journey, and we're going to take our bodies simultaneously on a mathematical journey to begin making a connection with the Holy Grail point of the planet. We're going to journey for a moment to the Grail, and the images that we use in this journey will create the mathematical relationships of energy within the inner Templar that will allow your inner Templar, your inner body energy systems, to connect with the energy systems of the planet more fully. The purpose of this exercise tonight is for those, whether or not you are joining us for the rest of the workshop, even if you leave here tonight and never again use any of the work that we do, if you can remember this one thing, it can assist you, and you can assist yourself through it. We are going to go on a simple journey to the Grail point. We're going to go into a space there, and this is a space that you can move your consciousness into from wherever you are on the planet, anytime you want to, for any purpose. It is a space that will work in the same way that a Maharic seal does. It is a fast way to activate your personal Maharic seal as well. What we're going to do is project a portion of ourselves to the Grail point and put ourselves within it. And we are going to breathe frequency there, 12th dimensional frequency, into our bodies and being. If you work a bit using the Maharic seal technique in the long form, a few times, and then switch to this extremely fast form, you will be able to activate your own Maharic pillar, your Maharic seal. With the journey, we'll simply keep our eyes closed. And first, we'll just try to remember. Remember a time beyond the time that's here, a time when you knew yourself as an eternal being. Just try to imagine this time, for in the imagining you will bring back the memory. Imagine for a moment that you are an eternal being. You are a field of consciousness, positioned way up above anything like space-time and matter. And you're making a decision to enter space-time and matter for purposes of experiencing certain things. Try to be with this space for a moment and find it within yourself. From this space, nothing matters in the physical world, because it is known that it is all safe and protected in God's creation. All the worries and the cares that go with being in density, from this beyond density space, they seem small, and you can see them as lessons that you're teaching yourself, and experiences that you're putting yourself through, simply in order to learn more about what it means to be manifest under many different conditions. Feel a part of yourself now within your body that begins to carry this vibration of this space beyond space and time, almost as if there is a ghost inside of your body that is you, that if you didn't have a physical body but you were going to visit people here, it would be like a two-dimensional ghost image of your body. Try to feel its presence inside of your physical body, as if there are two of you sitting in the chair. Imagine for a moment that your ghost body inside of you moves its left arm in a different position than your left arm is in the physical body. Try to feel the sensation of your physical arm staying where it is, but your ghost body arm stretching out to the side. It'll help you get to feel the difference between the body that you have now that can travel through space-time and the one that is confined to space-time. We're going to take this ghost body now. We're going to take it and rise it up. We're going to inhale. And as we inhale, feel it pull up a little bit. And then exhale, and it stops moving up, just stays. But notice that its feet are now where your knees are. And the next inhale, feel the ghost body moving up again as it's pulling out of your body and going upward. And exhale, and now its feet are at your pelvic area. Another inhale, and exhale, and the ghost body's feet has moved up to your shoulder area. You're almost separating the bodies now. And one more inhale. And exhale. And now imagine that you can feel the feet of your ghost body standing on top of your head at the crown chakra. Try to feel a fuzziness of energy on top of your head, as if light feet were standing there. And now try to feel yourself inside of your ghost body, where if it were standing on top of your head, its head would go through the ceiling. Try to feel that a little bit. Try to feel the reality of the pale violet ceiling and the plaster that it's made of, as if you were feeling in your ghost body. Now, we're simply going to be aware that every time we inhale, we're going to move the ghost body up, and every time we exhale, it stops where it is. And then the next inhale, it moves further. We're not going to worry about conscious breathing too much. We're just going to be aware that as the body breathes, that's what's happening. For we're going to put our consciousness in the ghost body, and we're going to rise up with it. And we're going to go up to the 12th dimensional frequencies. And we're going to fill the ghost body with pale silver light. Just imagine now the feeling of the ghost body. Its feet are now moving upward, away from the top of your head. Try to see it from both perspectives. It would be multi-vector consciousness. You're aware in two places at once. Feel the ghost body rising up, with you in it now. Feel yourself getting lighter and lighter and moving up. And imagine from the ghost body you can see the house down below, and you can see the clouds, and you're moving through the cloud cover and into the stars. So imagine the feeling of floating upward into the stars. Feel the freedom and the lightness and the health. Anything that ached in the physical body is left behind you now. And imagine as you move upward into space, that far out in the distant galaxies, there is a pale silver star. That star will symbolize what is called the Christos, the D12, dimension 12 field of hydroplasmic, pre-matter liquid light that all of us emerged through to get here. It is our heritage to reclaim this place of being. And it is always with us. And if we remember it is with us, we can draw upon its wisdom, its love, and its healing. Imagine the ghost body now floating through space, ever so gently, just floating up toward this star, because the star, the pale silver star of the Christos template, will call you in, it will call you home. It's like a tractor beam. Once you point yourself there, it will start to pull. And imagine you are being taken out into the distant galaxies. And as you get closer and closer to the star, you can feel the pale silver radiate all around you, like indeed a tractor beam of pale silver light. And imagine now that you are moving toward that star. And your ghost body now moves into that star. And all of a sudden, your ghost body disappears. And all you feel is yourself in at one-ment with the pale silver star of the Christos. It's the universal Christos that belongs to all, but also belongs to each. Try to feel these frequencies as you. You don't need the image of the body here, for it is beyond matter form. It is pre-matter. feel yourself for a moment as a wave of liquid light. As if your consciousness is simply a wave, you could imagine it to be like liquid mercury, as we know it here, but of a much higher, finer nature. Know yourself for a moment as this wave of liquid light, pale silver liquid light. In entering this space, you have created certain activations, temporary, in the body that will allow what is called the astral body to pick up enough frequency to pass into the Grail point. For the Grail point has a natural Maharic seal on it. It has a natural 12th dimensional seal. So you would have to take the part of your consciousness that you were going to take there, you would have to fill it with 12th dimensional frequency temporarily to be able to pass into the Grail point. Imagine your ghost body rapidly descending down towards you now. Feet first, it's going to come right back into your physical, like it's being shot out of the star and back down through space. And it slows down as it approaches your physical body. So when it hits your head, it doesn't hit you hard. And imagine now the feet of your ghost body. But now your ghost body is a pale silver ghost body, as if it's a body made of pale silver liquid light. And it's going to move down into your physical body now. Now each exhale breath will pull it down into the physical body a bit more. Try to feel the reality of your pale silver ghost body inside of your physical body now. And just for a moment, to let your mental body know that it's there, take the right hand of your ghost body and move it out where you could put the palm in front of your face as if you were looking at your physical hand, but leave your physical hand down. To your right arm. Pick it up and imagine you are seeing with your psychic eyes the silver hand of the silver-filled ghost body. It's letting your mental body know that it's in there. And now we're going to take a brief journey to the Grail point. When you're doing these on your own, you can imagine the silver star that we just visited coming down through your crown chakra and filling the ghost body inside you with silver. And then from doing that, we would go into this next space that we're going to do, and we'll do this rather quickly. Become aware of your heart chakra, the energy center that is in the breast region, in the center of the body. In this exercise, we are going to project from the heart chakra, which is the 4th dimensional chakra that is connected to what is called the astral plane. Imagine now that in the area of the 4th chakra, deep inside the body, at the center vertical current, the energy current that runs vertically up and down the center of the body, the intersection between the vertical current and the heart chakra is the place that we're going to project from. You can also project to the Grail once you've filled with the pale Maharic frequency from any one of the chakras, and each will give you a different experience. But the first and easiest access point is from the 4th dimensional astral space. Imagine now that in that space inside your body, beneath the breast, at the center of the body, that your ghost body inside contracts into a small point of silver light. Your ghost body has now turned itself into a replica of that silver star. Now imagine from that silver point of light in your heart chakra that a beam in the shape of an arc of pale silver light comes out of the heart chakra, and imagine that it is going out through space, out of the house, way down the street toward the beach. See the beach now as the arc of pale silver light crosses the beach and goes out over the water. And now out over the water, a quarter mile off the coast of this beach at Siesta Key, imagine that the arc of this beam of light moves down, and it begins to move downward, downward into the water. And from that point, it moves down through the water, and through the sand below the water, and through the rock beneath the sand beneath the water, and downward into the earth's core. Now imagine that you have this arc of pale silver light from the spark of light that is you inside of your heart chakra, a bridge of light reaching out over the space, and it doesn't matter if it's 1,000,000 miles away or if you're sitting right in front of it. Imagine the arc of light. You've just created a bridge, a tunnel for you to travel down into the Grail point. At the end of your silver tunnel, imagine in the earth's core there is a tiny, tiny little speck of silver. It's a little silver sphere. That is the symbol we will use to represent the Grail point. And what is interesting about this point is it appears tiny, almost microscopic from here. But when you move your consciousness inside of it, it becomes huge. It becomes a house of many mansions. In the last part of this exercise, now that we have brought the bridge of pale silver light from our heart chakra over into the Grail point, the end of our bridge touches the silver sphere around it, as if you were putting a cup over a marble. The end of your silver bridge is like the mouth of the cup, coming down over the tiny silver sphere, like the marble, and that is the Grail. Now you're going to simply remember yourself as your ghost body that turned itself into a spark of silver light. And you're just going to breathe naturally and let yourself drift from the heart chakra through the bridge. Feel the sensation of being surrounded by this tube or tunnel of pale silver light, and feel yourself moving forward toward the ocean. Imagine you can hear the ocean waves as you get closer into the part of your bridge that crosses the sea. Imagine now that you are passing through the part of the bridge that goes down under the water. It is like a tube where you don't feel the water, but you know what's around you outside of your bridge. And now imagine that you're passing through the part of your pale silver tube that goes through the sand and then the rock. And then there is a sensation of almost a free fall, where you, as a spark of silver light, just begins to fall downward as the earth core pulls you home. Now imagine your little spark of light that's about the same size as the little Grail point intersects with the Grail point and moves into the Grail point. And as the sparks intersect, all of a sudden your perception changes and you find yourself again in your ghost body. The ghost body transmuted itself back into its shape that looks just like you, but lighter. And notice that in your ghost body, first of all, when you do these exercises, when your ghost body pops back up and turns from the star into the body, just be aware of how did it land. Was it on its back, on its head? Did it fall over? Was it standing up? These will tell you certain things. And as you learn to work with being aware of those things, you will learn more. Your own higher self will teach you. So now imagine yourself in your ghost body, standing upright, and notice that you are inside of a massive silver sphere of light that seems to be alive. It seems to have a consciousness all its own that's massive. The consciousness of the Grail point represents a portion of the Christos level of the planetary identity. And when you come to the Grail point, you are requesting communion with the identity that is the planet. Energy is consciousness, and consciousness is energy. All things have an innate consciousness. But when it comes to a planet, there is a massive intelligence that goes with that consciousness. Feel yourself now surrounded by this massive, beautiful sphere of shimmering pale silver light, and notice that on the inside of this silver sphere, rainbow colors, pale, pale light spectra of rainbow colors continues to circulate all through. There will be times when you enter this space and your higher self will guide you to find doorways, because there are many doorways in this space, and when you move your consciousness through them, you open up certain DNA levels, you open up certain neural networks that are dormant in the body, so your perceptions can do new tricks. But for now, we will simply acclimate ourselves to being in this space. And now notice that since we did this with a group, we're all there together. Imagine us in our ghost bodies, kind of standing and waking up like a child that just wakes up out of bed and kind of says, oh, I'm back in the world again. Imagine in your ghost body, you're looking and saying, oh yes, there's the group, and we're all standing kind of looking at each other, rubbing our eyes. Oh, here we are. Try to feel the sacredness of the experience of being able to enter the Grail point. For one day, before too long, when the Templar is fully activated, and when your DNA is able to sustain physical passage, you will be able to experience entry into this space with a biological body. But when you enter with a biological body, you'll find yourself momentarily turned into a spark of light, literally. And then you will, as quick as thought, find yourself standing someplace else. And that someplace else is a very sacred temple complex. They're called the crystal temples. They are physical structures in a certain set of frequency bands. And your DNA has to be activated to a certain level before you can physically experience them. The crystal temples are the temples that were built to amplify and harmonize and stabilize the energies of what's called the halls of Amente stargates. The Grail point is the primary surface Earth access point to the halls of Amente stargates. There are many things to be learned in these spaces. And as simply as you can bring down a silver star, fill a ghost body with pale silver light, and make a bridge to the Grail point, and travel through that bridge and merge, and find yourself in that silver sphere with the rainbow colors moving. If you work with that imagery on your own, new things will open up. Parts of your higher self will start to say, add this, or you'll start to see people meet you there. You'll start to find other parts of yourself, and the earth will begin to share with you its secrets, the secrets that you came here to know, because each one of us came to know some of the earth's secrets. When we incarnated here this time, it was known that it was very possible we would have a Stargate opening cycle. They're like pushing the reset button on the planetary timelines, where a planet and a race have a chance to erase the past and to create a future that is more rewarding. So when you enter the Grail space, the beginning of awakening your own inner Holy Grail, let all of the past go for a moment and realize and experience yourself for a moment as if you just manifested on this planet, as if you were just born as a sentient, individuated consciousness from Source. And just try to feel that reality, your newness, your just bornness, your awakenedness. The Grail will help you, and the consciousness of the planet itself will help you. We will now come back into the room by simply turning our ghost bodies that are in the Grail back into little points of light and bringing them back through the bridge of light that still exists, back through the tube or tunnel and back into the heart chakra. And then you'll expand out again, this little point of light expanded out into the ghost body, and again feel the ghost body sitting within you. When you go home tonight, or go to your rooms, know that you're taking your ghost body with you, because you just woke it up. The ghost body is a part of the astral consciousness, but it's also a part of the fifth dimensional consciousness. It's really a blend of the higher frequencies of dimension 3, all of dimension 4, and the lower frequencies of dimension 5. It's a way to begin bridging those levels of consciousness in yourself and begin bridging the activation of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th DNA strand template of the 12-strand pattern. If you find your ghost body talking to you, that's okay too. You may find that as you lay down before you go to sleep, a part of you seems to be thinking something other than what your thoughts are focused on. That's that part of yourself processing new data that it just started to access. You can begin to listen to that part of yourself. And it's you. It's nobody else. But it's a part of you that moved its consciousness into higher frequencies to access some of the soul's knowledge. We can open our eyes now and come fully back into the space. We'll be using more Grail techniques. This was just a beginning of helping you to learn how to move your mind there. Because when you move your mind there, you are bringing the frequencies back with you. And there will be progressively stronger techniques of using certain symbol code combinations that are like locks and keys on the dimensional bands themselves. This is part of Templar mechanics, using symbols, because symbols are mathematical codes. If we see a symbol, it's actually a geometrical mathematical code. So we'll be using symbols to amplify that ability. And there are infinite ways to use the Grail point for healing, for expanding creativity, for expanding psychic senses, for harmonizing your relationship with your boss. There's all sorts of ways to use these energies to create harmony, peace, strength, and more joy. So I hope you enjoyed our little presentation tonight. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah. For those who have been doing this for at least a year or so.
Yes.
We were doing the massaging the 14 sequence 1 Cathara points.
Yeah, the Cathara healing,
and then
yes.
we did the Maharic activation of the Maharic shield, right?
Right.
Do we still continue to do that, or are we doing another technique?
Well, you can add to the techniques, okay? The Maharic seal technique and the ones taught in Cathara healing, they're good to do all the time. They're like a standard that you'd combine anything else with them.
Right.
Okay? Now, the other techniques, it's almost like being an artist, all right? And you have a massive amount of little paint tubes. And you want to paint a painting to create an effect.
Right.
And any one day, you can look through and say, let's take this color, this color, this color, and put those together and do this. Once you accumulate a toolbox of bioregenesis techniques, feel them out. What colors do you want to use today? What one feels like a good thing to do today? Yeah. But the Maharic seal is the one we always do.
Right.
Because that's the one that protects your own biofields from any type of intrusion or distortion that could affect you from the astral level or anything like that.
Substituting then the Cathara 6 point with there's the 14 sequence one, then there's the other one, the 6 point sequence 2. So
right.
You're not substituting.
You're talking about the points, right? The Cathara points. Okay. What he's referring to is something he's taken the workshop in the Cathara healing level 1, and there are several different techniques that you combined in there to do something that's called a Cathara Maharic reprogramming session on someone or on yourself. The points he's talking about go with certain points in the body that you can stimulate that will open the core template or close the core template and open the outer fields so you can direct where your energy is going. All right? With the technique that we just did, the Cathara healing stuff is like in and of itself, okay? Yeah. But you can combine this technique with that if you should feel like it. You don't have to, but you can. But I wouldn't stop doing the Cathara stuff and do this instead. Right. But if you want a real quick charge, or if you find yourself in a scary space for any reason, or something's just not right with you, you can use this technique of bringing down the silver star, feeling the ghost body in there, fill it with silver. Then it turns into the star, makes the bridge out to the Grail, and travels out and goes into that safe space. It's a fast way to do it, but it won't last as long.
Right.
Unless you've also worked with the longer version of the Maharic seal, because then your body gets used to holding the frequency. The whole thing with bioregenesis, any of them. Mm-hmm. The more you do them, the more your body gets used to holding that frequency, and the more natural it comes. Right. And there will come a time when your body just takes over and says, okay, you're going this way. Well, I want to take you this way. And your whole higher consciousness will start directing you in other places, and teaching you how to use the techniques in very specialized personal ways. Your consciousness, your higher consciousness will do that. Yeah, but in the meantime, use that for like the quick fix, but use the regular procedures in Cathara healing or even the temporary Maharic seal on a regular basis to build your body's ability to hold D12 frequency. And it will help activate the DNA strand templates. It will accelerate that process. And like I said, it's not going to happen overnight and all of a sudden tomorrow you wake up and you're Christed. It doesn't work that fast. But it will progressively. If you work with it, you will progressively be making changes that allow your higher consciousness to come in and allow your body to get stronger to hold those frequencies. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, I tend to answer questions and go forever. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. I hope that answered that. I think I lost the question by the time I got done answering it. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes?
I do. In the first segment of the Maharic Shield, the blue star, is that a physical star that we can identify it by name?
Okay. In the part where you take it up to the blue star, that's a loaded question. Technically, yes and no. When we're using it in the exercise, it isn't really. It represents a mathematical sequence that connects the chakras up to the Maharic template and then up to D14. Okay? But in greater terms, there is a connection between that and certain star systems. But it would be too complicated to even try to go into that in this discussion. We'd have to go through several other things that require diagrams. Okay, some of this stuff, it's like almost impossible to remember or understand what it is unless you see it in diagram form. So with the Cathara Healing Program, there's a lot of diagrams in there. It shows you where parts are in your body and what it looks like when when a shield pops out, like your Maharic shield below your feet. So the diagrams are very, very useful in certain things. Like there'll be a diagram. I hope to have this stuff ready for the people who are doing the workshop tomorrow. You'll get the basic 15-dimensional matrix where it shows what that looks like, so you can say, oh, we're here, and that's here. So there are diagrams that help a lot with a lot of this. I'd just like to thank you very much for coming and for being here, and it's wonderful to have you in our home. A real quick thing on angels, ETs, and archangels, and what are they really? And, are they real? Are they not real? Yeah, they are. We're going to get into the first controversial subject, which is, what is religion and where did it come from? This is a question that every person in every religious faith would be really, really, really wise to ask themselves. There are people who are devout Christians who will not take anything from any other source but the Bible. Yet they never ask themselves, and they are never taught to ask themselves, where did the Bible come from? Where did this information come from? Who put it there? Okay? Well, God did. Okay. When? How? What about the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD that edited 90% of the texts? They don't ask these questions. If we begin to ask the questions and not be afraid to explore the answers of things like, where did religion come from here? Because it's such a powerful force in our cultures and always has been. It's only been in the last couple of 100 years where the scientific paradigm has taken over. Before that, religion has been the thing that cultures were organized around. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, and everything that came up from there. Particularly, our contemporary society foundations were founded on religious beliefs. That this is the way reality is, God said so, this is the way you behave because you have to because God said so. And it has set the whole paradigm of our cultural mores, and we're programmed with this from the time we are born. If we begin to ask questions, it's very helpful to start really looking at those beliefs that we've been given. Because beliefs are powerful things. If we can acknowledge a little bit of science, which is scalar science, that says every time you think a thought, you generate a scalar wave pattern, a pattern of light and sound that interacts with the body.
When you are dealing with light and sound patterns, you are directly affecting the body's manifestation template, its core template, which will govern your perceptions and the amount of consciousness you can hold. When you have a set of ideas, those ideas are a scalar grid that moves through the scalar grid of your body. So if you have ideas that say, this is right and this is wrong, this is the way things are and this is not, if you pick a belief system that is limited, or that, say, tells you you're a sinner, and you're bad, and you're fallen out of the grace of God, and you're damned if you don't do this and this and this to the Pope or the priest say, you are creating a pattern in your body, a filter that you will perceive everything in reality, including yourself, through. Not only that, you are creating for yourself an obstacle to the living Spirit of God moving through you. Because the living Spirit of God, and this is one thing I would say to anybody of any religion, is not going to judge someone because they refuse to follow an ancient book, particularly if that ancient book blocks your ability to feel the presence and respond to the guidance that Spirit or God gives you now. So when we examine religions, there's a lot of very practical reasons why we need to do it. Right now, in our contemporary society, in the New Age movement, there's some scary things happening under the guise of new religion. Some of it's fine, some of it's not. But what's really interesting, before we look at the New Age movement to really understand what's happening there, there's a whole history of the evolution of religion on our planet. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole documented, go through the history books and say, well, at this period, the Sumerians believed this and that. If you want that stuff, you can look it up yourself. I'm here to bring you new data, as is being taught to me. In exploring religion, I was taught to go to the core. Where did all of those ancient texts, do they have anything in common? And if so, where did they come from? The answer to that question is a very surprising one. And this is really the key to the mystery of the Voyager's material and where it comes from. In our ancient history, there were a set of 12 metal discs that were created through a technology from what's called density 2, which is dimensions 4, 5, and 6. It's a semi-etheric matter form. When you're there, it feels like when you're here. Okay, the bodies just feel a little lighter and the matter feels a little lighter. It is a physical technology, not just a spiritual or hypothetical technology. There are in existence, and they used to be on this planet, 12 discs. They're about the size, they were kind of shaped like little cylindrical diamonds, and you could hold them in the palm of your hand. They're about that wide in diameter, and you could hold them in the palm of your hand. And people who know how to run the Kundalini energies through their bodies would be able to run certain energies down to the heart chakra, push it out, the little chakras in the palms, and trigger activation of them. With triggering of the activation of these discs, they would project outward holographic displays, like a running movie of history. These technologies are not unique just to the plates. These are technologies that are used by interdimensional angelic or stellar races. When you get into density 3 and 4, you don't need hard technologies like that. But in density 2, they have them. And that's the next place we're evolving into, is density 2, unless we happen to have an avatar contract and are going to go out through ascension all the way up. Okay? Now, with the evolution of religion on this planet, there's one thing that through all of our recorded history that all of those religions have in common. They were taken from the information in the set of 12 cloister Duratura plates. Those cloister Duratura plates is what they're called, CDT plates, cloister Duratura. Now, cloister refers to the cloister human race, which were the part of the human race evolution program here. We had root races, and with them there was a cloister race, which would come in first, and then the root races would be born through the cloister races. The cloister races, which is a subject covered in Voyager's Volume 2, Secrets of a Mente, the cloister races had higher DNA strand template activation. They were kind of like guardians that would assist in the evolution of the root races. In a period in our history, cloister Duratura is what I want to explain too. Dura is a word in the ancient Anahazi language that means soul. It refers to the density 2 level of the reality system in a 15-dimensional time matrix, and it refers to your own personal density 2 level of consciousness, which is your dimension 4, 5, and 6 consciousness. So Dora refers to the soul, and the next density level going up in the ascending scale would be density 3, dimension 7, 8, and 9. That is called Tura, or the oversoul. So Cloister, Dora, Tura. They were given to the cloister races, and they were basically the teachings of the soul and the oversoul. But they weren't just spiritual teachings. They were that. But they are extremely detailed scientific teachings of universal unified field physics that taught people what the manifestation process was, how they got here in a body, how they could activate the DNA code, what their connection was to the planet and the planetary Templar grids. There's a massive amount of data stored in the Cloister Dora Tura plates. The Cloister Dora Tura plates were presented to our race on Earth as a gift from some of the interdimensional races from the higher dimensional density fields, the angelic legions. They were given to us 248,000 years ago. On this planet, there was a race called the Urtites, which were one of the seed races for the cloister races of the human lineage. The Urtites and some of the human cloister races, like the Brenoe and the Urantrians and the Melchizedeks, were on planet at the time. These races had massive Templar complexes built. The Templar was actually running in those days, and we talked about the Templar complex a bit last night. Anybody here now that wasn't here last night? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get into the Templar complex later, so let's just say real quick when I say the word Templar complex, what I'm talking about is the energy system that runs through this planet. It's a system of stargates that open at certain times, and they control the ley lines, the vortices, the grids, everything in the planet. And it's literally the manifestation template of the planet. So when you understand Templar mechanics, you are understanding the core manifestation of the planet and how to run its energies for the most effective ways. Okay? That's a real quick update on the Templar. Anyway, where is I going with this? All right. Now, in the days of the cloister races and the Urtites, there were massive underground temple constructs made, and some of them were above ground, but most of the above ground things were just like site markers, and some of them were housing. But the big cities were underground, and they were positioned on key sites on the planetary Templar where the Stargate access points were and where smaller portal access points were. They were used, these temples were not just a place to go and worship. They were used for a purpose, and that was to regulate and direct the energies coming in from our natural Stargate system. Every planet, every star, has a Stargate system. It's a Stargate system that connects the 5 densities of matter within a 15-dimensional time matrix. So this was really common knowledge. The things I'm talking about right now were common knowledge to the people, the Urtites and the cloister races on planet 200,000 years ago. Eventually, our archaeologists will find some evidence of those very ancient cultures. These are advanced human civilizations that predate any advanced human civilizations that our archaeologists or our scientists are confirming exist. They were there, and when I speak about this, I do it from a very deep space of knowing. I don't tell you these things or try to teach you these things because I think they're true or because I believe in them. I tell you because I know. You don't have to accept my knowing as your own. But if you do, fine. You may find your own knowing. That's what's most important. I remember having incarnations there and being there. I remember very detailed movies of my lifetime spent there. And I've met a lot of people in this life that I remember from those spaces. The things I'm doing right now are similar to what I was doing then. I was teaching from the Cloister Dora Tura plates once they were given. 248,000 years ago, there was a restatement of an interstellar treaty. It was the original treaty that was made between beings called the Brenoe in density 5, which is an antimatter density. It's beyond form. It's before you get into form. Closer to God, let's say, than here. These beings were commissioned to seed life into this time matrix, into this 15-dimensional system. And they created an agreement between them. And there were 3 primary Brenoe collectives. These are huge gestalts of consciousness. All right, not just 3 people or anything like that. They had an agreement called the Emerald Covenant that they would, in this time matrix together, the 3, seed life forms and stellar races And they would work in cooperative, peaceful, loving coevolution, acknowledging the law of one, which is the law of universal unified field physics. Everything is interconnected, and everything is a manifestation of the original primal source force, or God, that is primal and always. So the cloistered oratura plates were given to the races here by the Grail from density 5 as part of a restatement of the original Emerald Covenant at various times in the evolution of life forms in this time matrix, which the last life wave that was seeded here was 950 billion years ago, I believe. Our race is very young compared to a lot of other things that exist in the higher density levels. Since the time of the cloistered oratura plates being given, there has been a lot of misdirection as far as the nature of reality. When I talk about the Grail, these were things that were known when the cloistered oratura plates were given. If you said the word Grail among the Urtite races, they would usually bow their head in reference and say, yes, we acknowledge, out of love, because they knew them. They knew where they came from. Now, the Grail collectives gave the cloistered oratura plates to the humans on the planet at the time as part of a restatement of the original coevolution agreement. Since the time 950 billion years ago, way before humans were created, during that time, from that time up to the point where the cloistered oratura plates were given, there were many, many different restatements of the Emerald Covenant, because there were numerous of the angelic legions that were created first that began to war with each other and become destructive and not follow the law of one. And restatement of the Emerald Covenant meant that whoever was entering the Emerald Covenant would agree to work with the principles of the law of one and acknowledge that we are all part of the same source, and would agree to work peacefully for coevolution, which means we'll evolve but not at your expense. We'll help each other evolve. The Emerald Covenant was a freedom treaty also. There were many, many things in the Emerald Covenant that we'll talk about later on this afternoon, and it'll be in this book too, that were basically a statement of rights that every being manifest in this time matrix had. And it was a treaty of love. All of the religions that have certain ideals that they uphold, that's where they originally came from, the original Emerald Covenant Treaty. Now, 248,000 years ago on this planet, after many, many eons of periods of peace and periods of war among the interstellar angelic legions that involved the human races before that time, there was another restatement of the Emerald Covenant given to the people of Earth. And the human beings, the Urtites and the cloister races, entered this covenant they were very, very willing to do this. It was entered with another group called the Syrian Anunnaki, who were actually an Avenger race that was created by a fallen angelic matrix to try to take out human beings. That's what their whole purpose was. That was what they were created for, the Syrian Anunnaki race. So this is like a legacy of really shame and sorrow that they carry, but they can be helped too. Now, in the coevolution agreement of the Emerald Covenant that was restated 248,000 years ago, the Syrian Anunnaki races had infiltrated and were progressively infiltrating human culture. They had done this twice before in the first two seedings of the human lineage on this planet. And because of it, there was a need for the third seeding. Every time they got involved and tried to take over, it ended up in decimation of the planet, usually pole shift and wiping out of the human race. Our race was seeded on this planet 3 times. This is the third seeding. Now, the Emerald Covenant of 248,000 years ago served partially as a purpose of being a peace treaty. At this point, there were a number of Anunnaki races and hybrid races that were on the planet with us. And it was an agreement with certain of the Anunnaki groups and all other angelic legions that we would evolve here peacefully together. And the important thing, and this is the thing that's like the golden promise of the Emerald Covenant, was that we would have all of the knowledge of how to run the planetary Templar complex turned over to us, because human beings were created with a purpose. There was a creation contract. It's called a creation contract in the higher levels of the Grail. They had a purpose, and they were assigned a mission. They were created, the human form was created to house consciousness from beyond the time matrix, which is considered an ascended master's consciousness. The gene code would expand enough to do that. And they were commissioned by the Brenau to be a race that could walk around in the densities and keep the peace and ensure that universal unified field physics and the law of one were being applied to the planetary Templar complexes and stargates and the interplanetary Templar complexes. We were created as a guardian race. The Anunnaki were created right around the same time in order to make sure we didn't get to do our job. They've had a lot of success right now when we look at our history. The cloister door tour plates were the beginning of the promise returned again after 2 seedings had ended in destruction. 2 seedings of the human lineage on Earth had ended in destruction. Once again, after many wars from the beginning of the 3rd seeding, the peace treaty was brought to the table again, and the races on the planet were offered the opportunity to enter and to work together. And they were given and entrusted with the 12 discs, the 12 silver discs. And what those discs held were huge amounts of data on, first of all, the history of the whole seeding of this time matrix. It included the angelic rosters. It included all of the different races of beings on every planet and every density. They were huge storage devices. The history was given so human beings would never forget where they came from, so they would never forget what they were created to do, so they could fulfill their creation contract. And in that fulfillment is the greatest human joy, because there's always a part of the human organism that feels that. There's always a part of a human being, no matter how messed up they may seem in the personality level, that craves that original, this is what I'm created for, this is what I'm here for. Of course, now I remember. It's in the cellular memory. We carry it with us. There are many other things in the cloister door tour plates. There were teachings on how to run the Templar complex. Very, very detailed scientific teachings based on scalar wave mechanics, based on knowing how to fully understand the human biology and its manifestation template. So you would know how to run the Kundalini energies through your body and through your DNA template in order to affect and direct energy through the planetary grids. There's a huge amount of data on that. This is where, in the New Age movement, we're getting pieces of the light and sound technologies coming up. This is why they're coming up. Because information from the cloister door tour plates is being brought back to us in this time. The cloister door tour plates were also frequency transmitters, and they were given with a set of something called the signet shields. We talked yesterday, for the people who were here, we talked about the word signet and how it refers to the primary stargate control points in a planet's Templar complex, and that there are 12 within 4 densities of matter that correspond to Earth. So there's 3 on Earth and 3 on each level of the planet going up. Now, the signets, which are natural occurrences in the planetary body, that are places where frequencies cross over each other from this space and into the higher dimensional fields. When the Templar is activated, those places open as gates. Now, when the opening cycle on a planetary level goes in its natural cycle, the gates open and then they close again. Part of the Emerald Covenant Treaty, and part of what the guardians and keepers of the Templar were to do, were to have the ability to keep the gates open and use them at will, even during periods of time that weren't part of the usual cycle of opening and closing. There were ways, if you used universal unified physics, unified field physics, the right way, within what they call the will of God, within the law of one, that you could have access to the gates without damaging anything or anyone. Therefore, it was considered in divine right order to use them. With the cloister door tour plates, there was also a set of 12 larger discs that resembled hubcaps. They were also silver, and they're made out of a silver kind of metal that feels very, very light. It's almost about as light as tin foil, yet it looks like it should weigh a lot more, but it doesn't. The plates, the signets, these larger hubcap-shaped things, went with the cloister door tour plate discs, because there was a way you could activate the plates to throw frequency into the signet shields, little hubcaps, and it would strike a resonant tone that would begin a process that would pitch frequency in a way that it would open the stargates when you wanted them open. And you could take people through. These smaller hubcap-shaped discs would actually begin to hover and oscillate, and then they would turn into what looked like liquid light, but it would hover there, and there'd be a blue aura around it, and then they would just kind of go pop, and they would create a field. They would create a Merkaba field, which is a vehicle that allows you to move through stargates without causing harm to your physical body. It's also a natural condition for the physical body once you are fully spiritually activated and your 12-strand DNA template is fully activated. The signet shields were given to the Urchites and the cloister races because they were being entrusted with being the guardians of the Templar. These aren't technologies you would put in the hands of someone who hadn't proved themselves as far as working in the law of one and caring very much about Spirit's will and God's will, because it's a technology that could be abused terribly as well, not to mention the knowledge that was stored in the cloister door tour plates. When these gifts were given to us, there were 12 of the cloister door tour plates and 12 matching signet shields. Each of those signet shields went with one of the primary 12 stargates in the interplanetary Templar complex that runs through 15 dimensions of matter. These were the ascension passages. When the word ascension pops up in religious training, this is what they were referring to, as being able to ascend the physical body through the transmutative changes in the cellular structure that are necessary, turning the body progressively back through the stages of matter density that you went through to get here, back into pure consciousness and at one with Source. Stargates are the key. They're ascension passages. You can look at them in the science term and call them stargates, or you can look at them in the spiritual term and call them ascension passages. They are the same thing. So the cloister door tour plates and the shields were meant to give the guardians of the time, the human guardians on the planet, the ability to access the primary 12 stargates, primary 12 ascension passages in the interdimensional Templar complex. It was a huge trust, and the only reason it was given is because they knew that the human race was worthy of that trust. That's what it was created to do in the first place. The cloister door tour plates have a very interesting history on our planet. Things worked well with the Urchite races until the stellar activation cycle, which is the time when the stargates are to open, natural cycle of stargate opening. 210,216 years ago, there was a stargate opening cycle, a natural one. And the guardian groups and the Urchites were there with their technologies to assist the Earth in that process. And they were attacked by some of the other human hybrid races on the planet. And the planet went into pole shift, and everybody was vaporized by what's called a red pulse, which is a frequency pitched by the solar fields when stargates are closed too rapidly, and they're not supposed, once they start to open, you're not supposed to close them. They're supposed to open, do their cycle, and then go back into the closing cycle. When you interrupt that and block the planetary grids where they can't bring in that energy, backs up into the solar grids and then throws it back down, the people of the time got fried by a red pulse. And that's basically, if you see those sci-fi movies where people are there 1 minute and they get hit with like one of those weird little lasers and then boom, they're gone, a little dust maybe falls, that's what happened to the people on the planet at that time. A lot of them evac'd. They knew it was coming. So they were able to get off planet, and some of them went into what's called the inner Earth, which it's another reality field very closely linked to ours through portals that are part of our Templar. Right before the cataclysm that happened 210,216 years ago, the cloister door tour plates were taken off planet, and so were the signet shields. But they were to be given. They were part of the decree of the Emerald Covenant restatement, that when the races matured again to get to the point where they were capable of running the Templar complex, they would again be offered entry into the Emerald Covenant consciously, and they would be given, as they proved their ability to handle power, they would be given those technologies back again. This has been attempted numerous times. The evolution of our religions is really what we have as the remnant evidence of the existence of the cloister door tour plates. The one thing every religion has in common is the fact that the tenets and teachings of that religion were originally translations or partial translations, distorted translations, or intentionally manipulated translations of the data contained in the cloister door tour plates, which was the true galactic and intergalactic record. every religion. We have had, for thousands of years, war and misery among human beings because they had different opinions over who God was and what their relationship to God is. It's really sad when you begin to realize that originally all of the teachings that they're staking their life on and turning against their brother and their neighbor for were the same teachings. In some of the information that I'm going to cover, and there'll be more of it in the book because there's too much to cover. It'll take me 3 days to cover all of this. But there's a history of what happened with the data from the cloister door tour plates and how that directly affected what we call the religions today. If we begin to understand that history and see the great travesty that was done to this race and how its heritage was intentionally and purposely denied, we will be able to start to understand what is happening right now in the New Age movement. Because the things that were perpetrated in the past are again being perpetrated. And there is one reason. Every time the planet goes into a natural stellar activation cycle, Stargate opening cycle, the angelic legions, fallen and risen, have a vested interest in the interplanetary Templar complex, in the Stargate system that runs this 15-dimensional time matrix. Earth has several key positions. It has one of the main gates that you can access other main gates through. So Earth is prime real estate during a stellar activation cycle. This is why we're being visited now. This is why the New Age movement happened. This is why the UFO movement happened. And it's the same thing that happened at various times when we had religious texts. We trace the origins of the Bible backward. It goes back through the official Bible, I believe, was created through the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, which was really commissioned by the Roman Empire to unify the peoples under one very dogmatic religion that if you didn't follow, you were in big trouble. What they drew their information from to create what became the Bible were records from various different historical periods and religious cults that they called them at the time. A cult is basically something that differs from the dogma that's the predominant one on the planet at the time. The Essenes, which were a sect of the Hebrew peoples, had kept many, many records on things that had to do with the Templar, and that had to do with Ascension, that had to do with the history and all of those things. The Council of Nicaea took some of the Essene teachings, and they are the primary foundations of what we call the Bible today. They edited about 80 to 90% of the Essene documents, and they twisted a number of things. What the Essene documents originally taught was about the inner Christ. They taught about Jesus as well. They taught about the two men who came in within a couple of years of each other as avatars. There were 12-strand DNA, and one was a 12-strand DNA-activated avatar, to create what's called the Grail line, or the Christian genetic line. So what we teach does not deny Christ at all. What the cloister door tour plates teach does not deny Christ at all. What it denies is the fact that it was one person that ended up crucified, so everybody else should be miserable and crucify themselves from there on after. The crucifixion story was not true. It was created right a bit before the time of the Council of Nicaea by certain sects that wanted to get control of the mass belief systems. They consolidated the two persons who represent one. They were both named Jeshua, but it was spelled differently, and they're from different family lines. One was from what's called the House of David. One was from what's called the House of Solomon. The House of Solomon was the house that when I say house, I'm referring to family line, because they kind of referred to them as the house of, Jacob, John, whoever it was back then. From the House of Solomon came Jeshua 12, Jeshua Melchizedek, after his baptism, and he was the 12-strand avatar that the whole Christ drama was built on. And within a few years of his birth, there was another one born that was part Anunnaki and part angelic human. He was born in cooperation with the higher angelic legions that assisted the man named Jeshua Melchizedek to come in. It was a co-evolution agreement. They tried to restate the Emerald Covenant in that period of time. They were supposed to assist the two primary race strains on the planet to get their DNA back to where it was supposed to be so they could do ascension. Jeshua 12 worked with the people who had the original angelic human imprint. Jeshua, they call him 9 because he was a 9-strand avatar rather than a 12-strand activated avatar. Jeshua 9 was here to assist human beings who had got entangled in their genetic families with Anunnaki hybridization from ancient times, because they carried certain distortions in the DNA template that would block their ability to ascend or to pass through stargates. So the 2 Jeshuas were sent in as part of an attempted restatement of the Emerald Covenant 2,000 years ago to bring these teachings back to us. There were books. You know, they're always looking for the lost books of Jesus. They know he must have wrote something. Everybody else was writing things out there, but you can never find the books of Jesus. Like, where are really the real books of Jesus? He must have wrote more than a few things that are in the Bible now. You know, there were huge amounts of teachings that were recorded by both of the Jeshuas. One version of it was to assist the Anunnaki races that had certain distortions in consciousness because of the distortions in the gene code. It would assist them through working through some of the laws of love and the spiritual things on not abusing power and those kind of things first, where the ones that were brought in by Jeshua 12 were very clear and specific, just like the ones we're bringing through now. They were direct translations from the Cloister Torah plates. They detailed the Templar. There's a book called the Book of Maps and Keys, which was the book of maps of the Templar complex on the planet, where all the most powerful sites were, where the Stargate and portal access points were, and it also included the maps through the whole stellar regions, all the way up to 5 densities of where the Stargates were located. This information is still in the Cloister Torah plates. It would probably take 20 years just to pull that section of it, okay? But these are some of the teachings that were supposed to be in the Bible. And the story started even before that. It started with the emergence of our culture. If we look at historical records, the way it's presented as far as what we're taught in school is history. We're taught that, like, Sumerian culture was probably the first organized, human culture, and before that there's, like, nothing but roaming bands of, of beings that resemble humans. There's like this huge gap of history in here, like, all right, we just spontaneously appeared as Sumerians. Interesting concept. We just went from these, like, really primitive beings into being Sumerians, and then Egyptian cultures and the other cultures emerged from there. Yet you have, all through history, ancient records, ancient stories about the lost cities, the lost advanced cultures, the lost city of Atlantis, of Lemuria, all of these things. Man, the cities were lost, and so were the records, on purpose, all right? Before Sumerian culture, there was Atlantean and Lemurian culture. That wasn't the first. That wasn't the ancient history, or the pre-ancient history. That was kind of like the tail end of the very long pre-ancient history that went back before our history books acknowledge. The Cloister Torah plates were given here 248,000 years ago. And that was in the 3rd seeding of this race. 800,000 years ago, they began the 3rd seeding of this race. 250 million years ago, this race was seeded here originally. There's a long history here. But the evolution of our religion, that has come to be religion in our societies, comes directly from the gift of the Cloister Torah plates and what has happened to that information and those discs since that time. There were a number of things that happened between the failed stellar activation cycle 210,216 years ago and the civilizations of Atlantis. The place was resettled after the devastation. It didn't end the human lineage because most of them went into what's called the inner earth portals. They're part of the Templar complex that connect to a reality field that is very close to ours. We actually, the way universal physics works, there's a planet, there's its parallel antiparticle double, and in between the two, there's its antimatter template. And when a being has its DNA activated to a certain level, it will experience the inner earth reality field as a physically manifest reality field, just like this one. Same thing with parallel earth. Same thing with here. So when the destruction happened with the last stellar activation cycle, people were taken, or enough people were taken, into the inner earth portals where they could have still a colonization base. So when the grid stabilized again, they could bring them back up and start over. And they did. And the Earthites and the Cloister races were returned to the surface Earth. And they eventually began seeding the 3rd seeding of the human root races. The human root races began with the Lumerians. And they were called Lumians first, in seeding 1, and Lumanians in seeding 2, and Lumerians in seeding 3. But they were basically a root race that had a certain purpose within a greater evolutionary plan, where This was called the Amente Evolution Plan, the angelic human evolution plan on Earth. We're a part of that plan, but we forgot. Okay? The cloister door tour plates have recorded all of this history. The last time they attempted to bring them here was during the Christ period. And within literally about 20 years after the translations started to come, certain forces on the planet made sure those texts were destroyed or disappeared. It has been a problem all along on this planet, and also on the original planet that humans came from, which is this planet's counterpart in density 2, called Tara. There has been warring between Anunnaki, human, and what's called draconian races. These races are angelic races, just like our race is an angelic race. To make it simple, the draconians, what we call the draconians now in contemporary times, came out of what's called the fallen seraphim. The seraphim were one of the primary Grail collectives that seeded this time matrix. The human lineage came out of something called the Elohai Elohim, which are one of the primary Grail collectives. And then there was a part of that group that fell, which means it severed its connection to Source, and it got its genetic templates and its manifestation templates messed up, which distorts the consciousness as well. They're called the Anu Elohim. They were originally part of the Elohai Elohim family. These are the beings that created the Anunnaki race strains in order to wipe out the human race strains that were being created by the Elohai Elohim. Our history and our conflicts go back millions and billions of years. The cloister door tour plates recorded that. It was recorded in them, so we would know. Now, what has happened in our history since that time? There's a couple of points that I want to find in here. They're probably quite surprising. When we hit the times of Atlantis, Atlantis had access to some of the teachings from the cloister door tour plates through a being from density 2 who was asked to bring a translation in. This being's name was Thoth. He came down as Thoth in our histories. Now, Thoth is an Anunnaki. He was part of something called the Nibiruan Council of Nine, which is part of one of the Stargate control committees, let's say, in density 2. Thoth was commissioned by the Emerald Order, Grail, which were the ones that governed the creation contract in the first place. That's why it's called the Emerald Covenant. They call them the Emerald Order, Grail, from density 5. He was commissioned by them to bring the teachings back into Atlantis, because by the time of Atlantis, there had been so many twists and distortions in the Templar teachings, and so many abuses being done to the planetary grids, that it needed to be corrected before those technologies were used to destroy the planet and the races on it. So Thoth had been commissioned to begin bringing the information of the cloister door tour plates back. In contemporary times, the New Age movement, there's some translations of a book called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is actually a very small and twisted version of what was originally the Thoth documents. The Thoth documents, he was one being, usually there were 3 in any time period. There would only be 3 humans on planet, or somebody commissioned from higher to come in, that would carry what's called a speaker's contract. A speaker's contract would allow a person, and you'd be worked with, to learn how to use the DNA template to remote access data. It's not channeling, it's completely different. Where you are able to pull data, you have to have, first of all, some training with handling the discs themselves, the plates themselves. Once you get used to that and used to playing with them in your proximity, you can learn to access them remote. Thoth was taught in those things and entrusted with that ability, so he could bring in teachings again of the original teachings of the Templar, of what real spirituality is, of what real God is. He was supposed to bring those teachings to the Atlantean priest caste, who were becoming progressively more and more corrupted and abusive of power. During the times when Thoth, and in here someplace we have the dates. This is all like new material, so the date, I have a billion dates in my head, so I don't have them remembered exactly. This was in the period of Atlantis, which ended in 9558 BC. Now, before that, there was something that was very, very detrimental to the evolution of our race that happened in 22,500 BC. There were problems happening because we were coming up on a potential another stellar activation cycle. And the Anunnaki races were at that point at war with the Guardian legions and the human legions that were in Density 2 on Tara. And they came in and orchestrated something we'll talk about later, and it's more detailed in the book. It's called the Great Deception. And they literally tricked the priest caste at the time that was trying to make sure the Templar opened properly and all of that. They tricked them into certain things that by the time they realized what was happening, they couldn't stop what became the Anunnaki invasion. Now this has a bit to do with what happened with the teachings of Thoth. When he came in, he originally came in as a representative of the Emerald Covenant. He got caught up in the political dramas of the times. And this is something that people in the New Age movement are not hearing about, because right now the Anunnaki are dominating the New Age movement through channeling and various things. Thoth was a good being. He wasn't a god. The Egyptians made him out to be, because he kind of presented himself that way in certain times. Some of the ones coming in from Density 2, who are really just six-strand activated beings, came in and pretended they were our creator gods at certain times and that kind of stuff. But Thoth wasn't originally one of the deceivers. He was originally one of the ones supportive of the co-evolution agreements, because he knew it would benefit both the Anunnaki and the human races. Because humans, even though Anunnaki were created to destroy them, humans were taught that it was their job to assist in the evolution of everything and anything on the planet to its highest level. If it was a fallen race, to help it get back into its connection with its higher parts so it could evolve and ascend out of the time matrix. Now, when Thoth came in, he was supportive of that. Things got very, very strange in 22,500 BC, and there was a lot of political problems happening with the planet Nibiru, with the Palladian star system in Density 2, with Tara, and down here. He became embroiled in a struggle within himself. Was he going to support the Emerald Covenant, or was he going to support, which he was being pressured to do, what's called the Anunnaki agenda? The Anunnaki's core agenda, and what they were created to do, aside from getting rid of humans, the reason they were commissioned to get rid of humans was because they wanted to take control of the whole Stargate system in our time matrix. Thoth came in and began translation of the Cloister Door Tour plates and began the compositions that became, in this time, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And he taught many things. When he became embroiled in the decision to would he stand with his own race or would he continue to support the coevolution, there were certain things that looked like supporting the Emerald Covenant might not work out well, and if he didn't, then he'd be in trouble if the other ones got in control. He knew that it would be worse. So he made a choice. What Thoth did that wasn't part of his original commission was he began to take some of those teachings and edit them and change them from what they originally were, leaving out certain key things that he decided he didn't feel humans were ready to have yet. It would have given them too much power, too much knowledge, too much control. Because of some of the things that were edited, because Thoth decided to take it upon himself to do so, there were a number of things we'll talk about later this afternoon that happened in 22,500 BC that have still, to this day, have had a tremendously detrimental effect on the evolution of human beings. Now, Thoth wasn't a bad being, and he was only one of many that have come in at different times to try to bring the teachings of the Cloister Door Tour plates. Whenever a being gets a speaker's contract to do that, it's because they have a long history of showing their ability to fulfill the law of one. That's why they get trusted with those contracts. It's not something that the Brenau orders give out easily. Okay, you go translate. You know, it's not like that. There's a lot of incarnations that a being goes through before they're permitted and would even know how to translate that kind of data. And Thoth was entrusted with it. He messed up a bit, and that had some detrimental effects on us. By the time of the Atlantean civilization's destruction, the teachings that Thoth had brought in, which were originally supposed to be only in verbal form. This is one of the things of the Cloister Door Tour plates. Up until the contemporary times, which, well, contemporary, I'm referring to the Christ period, really, They were intended to be done in verbal form, where the being who would be translating them would learn how, play with them for a while, and then learn how to tap in their energy field to the energy field of the plates and let it run through. And they would speak it. That's why they were called speakers' contracts, not writers' contracts. Okay?
Would you say that again?
Which part?
Just that last part, that they were, with those contracts,
They were speakers' contracts,
that they would
not
learn
writers'
how- learn
contracts.
how to run the information.
Oh, yeah. They would learn how. First, they learned to play with them while holding the discs and being in physical proximity to them, and learning to latch their energy field into the energy field of the disc so they could run frequency from their bodies and their consciousness into the field to trigger its activation. Then, after a while, they would be trained where the cloistered oratura plates could be put back in to a safe place. They were sometimes kept off planet because they were so valuable, and you could do a lot of damage if you had the knowledge and used it wrong. You had learned how to remote access them. So the ancient speakers who were entrusted with these contracts weren't to write them. That came later. They were simply to let them run, and they would teach, and they would speak them. And the way it used to work was however much frequency you could hold was yours. It would be spoken to you. And what you forgot you weren't meant to have yet, your DNA wasn't ready to hold it. So it was kind of done that way in the early days. Thoth's was one of the first written translations. This is one of the reasons he's come down in Egyptian history and is being known as the person who introduced written language. Well, there was written language before that, and it was used for various things, but not usually for translation of very highly protected ancient texts that told you how to run the Templar. When Thoth had his speaker's contract, he was not supposed to write it. He was supposed to teach it and speak it, and those who could hold it would have it, and they would go forth and speak it and teach it. He decided when he was struggling with which side he was going to end up on in a polarity drama that he really didn't want to be a part of in the first place, what he would do with the situation. And he chose to put it in writing. And he chose to turn those teachings over to the Atlantean priest caste. The Atlantean priest caste was predominantly in periods of corruption, even as back as far as 22,500 BC. Progressively, the teachings that were left by Thoth were used, abused, and turned into technologies that were never meant to be created among the Atlanteans. It was because of having those technologies that the continent of Lemuria was destroyed, and I think that was about, let me see, that was after, no, that was before. Atlantis went down first. In 28,000 BC, 28,000 BC, the continent of Atlantis was blown apart. The islands were left. 22,500 BC, Thoth made his error of judgment. And by 9,558 BC, because of that error of judgment, the teachings of the cloistered oratura had been used in a way that created the destruction of the Atlantean islands and created major pole shift on this planet again. It didn't end the third seeding, but it could have. It came close. It was decided after that, when they'd bring the races back up that had survived from inner Earth, because that's where they always put them. It's the easiest way to, if this planet goes into chaos, and it's going to go into an environment that cannot sustain human life. Because human life is so valuable to the Brennau and the higher beings that run this universe, they will always try to evac enough to regenerate civilization. So again, when Atlantis went down, many were evac'd into the inner Earth territories. Some of them stayed there permanently and just evolved there. A lot of the Anu races, which were hybrid human and Anunnaki, a lot of them stayed there and evolved there instead of on surface. Our races, when they came back from the Atlantean mess, came back without the power to run the Templar, because after the Atlantean mess, which almost, if it had blown up this planet, it would have taken out part of the Pleiades system and part of the Sirius star system as well, because of the energetic connections between them in their interplanetary Templars. It was decided that it was too risky to have this knowledge on the planet at the time. But they knew. The Brennau orders knew, and what I call the races of the Emerald Covenant, which are many, many different races in the 15-dimensional time matrix, they knew that they still honored the Emerald Covenant, which meant they would help humans evolve back into the original angelic human they were created to be, so they could fulfill their original creation commission of being guardians of the interplanetary Templar. So after Atlantis, the ability to use the Templar was taken away in certain ways by the removal of the cloister door tour plates. 2 of them were lost during that period because they had fallen into the hands of the corrupted Atlantean priest caste. So 2 of the set of 12 were missing when the Guardians took them off planet to try to secure them again. Those 2 were in the hands of some of the Anu races of Inner Earth. They've had them until 1999, when the final one was reclaimed. Yeah, they've used that information for a very long time, what they could get out of those 2 discs. Now, after Atlantis, we had a history of the evolution of culture that seemed very primitive. That's why we find a lot of primitive stuff, because we re-evolved. There were bands of roaming humans at that point. There were bands of other things. There were bands of creature humans, because in the Atlantean times, they did horrendous genetic manipulation experiments. They crossed all sorts of things with other things to see what would come out. Kind of like what our science is beginning to do, as it's playing with cloning and genetic evolution stuff. But in the Atlantean temples, they took it to a much more perverse level than we've reached. They created beings and things. Some of the more recent ancient type of man that we're finding, or even some of the apes, were not originally human beings. They were part human being and part something else spliced together. So when we came back, there were various forms that were on planet that came back up from Inner Earth. Some of them had gone in. Some of the Anunnaki and some of the draconian legions of Inner Earth had actually allowed some of the other strains to come in too. So the conflict wasn't over. You just put the nice people back on the planet and everything goes well. No, the game just started over again after Atlantis. And we had the emergence of Sumerian culture, which was an Anunnaki culture. That was an Anunnaki hybridization program where they were attempting to try to hijack human evolution. They're trying to do it again today, by the way. We'll get into more. Egyptian culture emerged, which was actually an attempt. The Egyptians, what we call Egyptians, are part of the Atlantean root race. Okay, they're a subfamily within the Atlantean root race, the original Egyptians. They were trying to restart again the Earth cultures. In the Voyage of Secrets of Amene book, for those who have not read it, there's a history of the Egyptian temples and things, and where they came from and who built them and how many times they were rebuilt and when they actually appeared. So that's all there. I won't go into that here. But what I'm trying to show is the evolution of the cloistered door tour plate's relationship to our evolution of culture and history and religious belief systems. The Egyptians and their beliefs in the gods and in the Ka and the light body and being able to continue on after death. These traditions were coming from part of the translations of the cloistered door tour plates that had been left by Thoth in the Emerald Tablet writings. The Emerald Tablet writings were held by certain priest castes of the Inner Earth, and they were progressively releasing small amounts of data into the communities. They'd contact 1 or 2 here and 1 or 2 there, this pharaoh maybe, or maybe that scribe, and they would start infiltrating the teachings again, slowly. Atlantis cataclysm took place, and this is where our recorded human history begins to start, where our history books now are starting to find, they have some evidence, and they think this is where human culture started. The Sumerians, Thoth was a part of that culture. He assisted. At that point, he was trying to be loyal to his own kind because his own kind was having a very hard time in the higher densities, or the higher dimensional density systems, trying to come to agreement with the Guardian legions. So he kind of played both sides of the fence because he was very loyal and he felt a very deep sorrow for his race. Imagine yourself being an Anunnaki for a minute. You were created by some beings in density 4, which is a pre-matter thing. You're a physical being, and your race was created with one purpose: to take over somebody else's something and to wipe out another race. Imagine how bad that would feel. There's just this sorrow that the Anunnaki races carry, and they try to compensate for in a lot of ineffective ways, because they were created by a group of creator godlets, let's say, that had severed their connection to Source. So they carry that burden with them. Thoth was very, very sympathetic to this burden. It made his heart ache. His two hearts ache. Yeah. A lot of the Anunnaki are aware of that. Some of them aren't. Some of them are just on autopilot and they don't care about anything. They can be very brutal. Thoth wasn't a brutal Anunnaki unless he was cornered. Then he could be very tricky and very manipulative, and he could tell very big lies. And that happened in some of our history, which they won't tell you in the Emerald Tablets that we have in the contemporary times. I'm not against Thoth or the Anunnaki, but this needs to be revealed if we're to understand what's happening in the New Age movement now. This is some of the very sensitive data, because there's whole Thoth movements out there right now that are emerging. For some time now, Thoth got himself in some bad standing, let's say, with Divine Right Order during the Atlantean period. But because of that, the matrix of consciousness that he incarnated out of, which was, let's say, his self at the avatar level in density 4, saw what it got itself into there and wanted to fix it and wanted to make it better. So it decided to enter a physical incarnation in density 1 as a being called, that came down in history as Enoch. They're the same person but different, just like you're you in this life and you have another incarnation that was you in that life, but you're a bit different. You know, you have your own views and ways of looking at things now and that kind of thing. Well, that's how the relationship is between Thoth and Enoch. But they're both incarnate out of the same matrix. And the reason that Enoch came in was to try to make up for what his matrix did in the Thoth period, and try to help the Thoth being, because Thoth is an immortal. Most of the beings of density 2 are able to sustain immortal biology. They don't deteriorate like we do. It's because of the way their gene codes operate. Some of them have limited lifespans, but that would look like millions of years compared to ours. But Thoth was at the time considered an immortal because he'd activated certain levels of the gene code. You know, 9th strand and higher will get you full immortality in the physical body. When he came in as Enoch, he came in again with a commission to, guess what? Translate the cloister door Torah plates. Let's try it again. But this time, because things were so messed up, and at this point, nobody knew any of the old Templar teachings. There were only little pieces that little groups would be given from the inner earth people. This time, he was told he could put it in writing. This time he was allowed. And Enoch began, I believe he entered in 2024 BC. He came in and began his translation of the cloister door Torah plates. And it started with the Book of Amente, which was the book that told the beginning stories of the halls of Amente stargates, which is what our planetary Templar complex is called. The stargates themselves are called the halls of Amente. It's a word that goes back to Terra, our original seed planet. And the next book he was supposed to bring in, and did, was the Book of the Angelic Rosters. It was the Book of the Nephilim and the Book of the Dragon. The Book of the Nephilim talked about Anunnaki, and it talked about how they had come in, and it talked about the whole history of what they had done to the first and second and beginnings of the third seedings. And it talked a bit about Thoth, and how Thoth was forgiven if he would come home, you know, and those kind of things. Those books were transcribed, and for a time when Enoch had possession, because for a time he had possession of one of the cloister door Torah plates, they give them to you one at a time to work with if you were going to have them on planet. Because the planetary grids were so distorted at the time because of the Atlantean cataclysm, the people who are guarding it are called the Syrian Azarites. They're Sirius B Azarites. They're a blue race of beings that are very hominid, human-looking, but they look blue. They were the guardians, and they still are, of the cloister door Torah plates. They had allowed Enoch to have one. And some of the Egyptian power elite got wind of the fact that there was a being named Enoch out there that had some of the ancient, sacred, coveted knowledge. And he was imprisoned for a time in the temples, and I believe one of the temples was the Great Pyramid, where he was kept in seclusion as a scribe, that he would be killed, which he didn't care, because he was quite an aware being when he came in. And go ahead, kill me, it's only a body. You know? There had been threats that other harm would be brought to his people. He came in through the Hebrew people. And there were threats made that if he did not cooperate and translate that disc he had for the use of the Egyptian power elite, then there would be harm brought to his people. So for a time, he complied. He was rescued by the Azarites. He was pulled out of the temples by the Azarites. But the Egyptian power elite at the time, which I think at the time was primarily, it was either draconian, there's a lot of switching as far as the lines, who was controlling them. Were they actually human, or were they human hybrid Anunnaki or human hybrid draconian? There's a lot of stuff going on with our human genetic lines. I think at the time, the human Anunnaki hybrids were the line of pharaohs that were controlling things. So they ended up with some of the coveted teachings again in their hands. But Enoch stayed on planet long enough to bring through the undistorted versions. Because as soon as the power elite, if it was a corrupted power elite that was not interested in its true creation story and being at one with Source, they would use that knowledge to abuse other beings. And that's what happened in some of the Egyptian cultures. They used some of that knowledge, but they only got a little. They didn't get anywhere near as much as they had in Atlantean periods. But Enoch went on after he was rescued and put in seclusion in a safe place. He created the books that I had mentioned, the 3 books of Enoch, the book of Amente, the book of Nephilim, and the book of the Dragon. The book of the Dragon detailed the history of the draconian races of the fallen seraphim, angelic legions, and how they have interacted with our culture here, and what they have done here, and how it has messed up human evolution. So those books, when we talk about the Bible of today, some of those teachings had still survived from Enoch's period, when the Council of Nicaea got a hold of them. The Council of Nicaea is what is now known as the Roman Catholic Church, unfortunately. And I have nothing against Catholics. Half my family's Catholic. They're not real happy with me when I get into these subjects. And my heart goes out to people who are so in love with the concept of knowing that God is there. And they've been raised in a tradition that tells them this is how you plug into that they follow belief systems, and they get very, very upset when you challenge the belief systems. My heart goes out to people that are in the Catholic faith, because if you look at the history of Catholicism, it takes you back to the Church of Rome, which is really an entity created by the Roman Empire as a mass control device. The Church of Rome took the ancient Essene teachings, took the books of Enoch, the books of the Jeshuas, the books of Jeshua 12's sister Miriam, the books of John the Baptist, took those books, edited them. Some of this stuff is still held, let's say, in a secret place that's well protected, that I'm not going to name on film. Saved my life for a while. People of the Catholic faith, or any Christian faith, the Christian concept is it. It is what it's about, okay? Your Christos template, your D12 level, your ability to actualize your 12-strand DNA template and become your angelic human self and ascend out of this time matrix and go back to at one with God. This is your heritage. This is your promise. But what the word Christian means right now means you're still stuck in a dogma set by the Church of Rome and the Roman Empire. Because even the religions that are Christian but no longer Catholic emerged from the Bible. The Bible was created, technically, by the Roman Empire as a control device. They took the most precious teachings and kept them for themselves. Some of them they're still trying to figure out. And what they did was consolidate a story that took certain parts of the teachings. Yeah, we'll talk about the Christ, but let's make it look like the people were really, really bad and they crucified him. And now if we really want to control people, you teach them that their Savior and their Messiah was man enough to die on the cross for God. So of course you should be. He suffered for God, so of course you should. This is what was a twist that was never, ever intended to be there. The teachings of the cloister door tour plates were what started the Christian movement. We had Enoch coming in and the Hebrew movement trying to bring the translations in, and he brought some of it in. Then we had, in 12 BC, the birth of, and there were several others that had little pieces of it that they brought in. Actually, I think it was in 42 BC, the first one, John, the man who became known as John the Baptist, who was half Roman and half Jewish, and had some real issues with dealing with the fact that the Romans weren't really happy that he decided to, begin the Christian movement. They weren't happy at all. He came in and started with his speaker's contract of translating the cloister door tour plates. Again, they were going to try to get the races ready. 2,000 years ago, they knew that in the time period we now identify as the year 2000, there was going to be another stellar activation cycle. They knew that then. The higher dimensional races knew that. So they were trying to prepare this race to get itself together so we'd know what to do with the Templar complex once it activated. The Christ movement was about that and about helping to reverse mutate the gene codes that had been so infiltrated by the Anunnaki race strains, because those gene codes would not survive a stellar activation cycle without some assistance. They would not be able to process the frequencies through the body. The bodies would get sick. So during the Christ period, they're here? Okay. Okay, they are here. We'll pick up. The caterer people are here and our lunch is being served. So I will pick up with this on the Christ story and how that began, what we have now today. And then we're going to get into some other things, some things that I want you to, by the time you leave here, I want you to know what the word on 10 things, that for anybody, especially the people who haven't, been to the other workshops, that you have, I can hold it up and say, look at this page, and this is what I'm referring to. So you have a visual representation. Usually I use an overhead projector for that. But we were planning to have this on the beach, and they didn't have facilities for the electrical hookup for it. So we were going to do it, with the handbooks or with something like this. And since we moved it back here, we just, I just did the handbook thingies, or like the pieces of the handbooks anyway. But what I'm going to try to do before you leave for, to go home, not tonight, but before you leave to go back to where you live, I'm going to try to have this expanded a little bit. There's some other pages that you would have right now if it wasn't for my printer doing its little nasty thing. There's a bunch of pages of block type that are like info bytes. Now, these are the info bytes that are going to go in that larger 80 to 100 page book, okay? These are like, after we talk about certain things in the handbook, then you'll find a couple of pages of these to give you more information. What I'm going to do is, because these are like consolidated info bytes that help to explain certain things very quickly in a short amount of words relatively than going on for 25 minutes trying to explain it, I may refer to these at some points as I go through the discussion that we're going to talk about, just to give you more information. One of the first things that I'm going to read this to you, because this is the way it's going to appear in the new glossary for the second printing of Voyager Secrets of Amenti. It's a glossary entry, but it's about something that I've been talking about all morning. I keep referring to the Brenau orders of density 5. Now, there's a lot more on this that the book will detail, that not the Voyager's book, but the handbook for the workshop will detail. We're getting into, when I talk about Brenau orders and density 5, they are considered in the time matrix. The first entry point, dimensions 15, 14, and 13, represent density 5. And here they come with the baby. And density 5 is what is known as the first field of light. In the creation process called stair-step creation, manifestation takes place. Individuation from source takes place. Actually, you're individuated from source, and the universe is, but it's taking place within source consciousness, so you're never separate from God. But in the model of stair-step creation, it's explained where, basically what the steps are. First, the consciousness of God individuates. I'm having a hard time talking here. Individuates into a field of sound. First, it's an inaudible sound field, a fixed sound field. And from there, because of interactions between certain vibrations of sound, the dynamic of light is created. So then the next thing would be an eternal light field. When we're dealing with energy of any form, all energy emerges from the same place, the consciousness of source, which is a conscious, aware, intelligent, sentient force of energy. So when I'm talking about a sound field, it is composed of units of consciousness called particle, particle, and particum, which are the ultra-microparticle level of manifestation. The science hasn't been able to detect yet, but they will eventually. We have basically source, and then as we begin to have our externalized universes. It goes into the sound field, then into the light field, and then into dimensionalization. The light field represents antimatter, the first blueprint of light and sound, where polarization, the pattern for polarization is set. And then we go into dimensionalization that requires polarization. When I talk about the Brenau, I'm talking about the three primary gestalts of consciousness that form the primary light field, the first primal light field in our time matrix in dimensions 15, 14, and 13. There's a lot to these. It's a field of original light, first cause light, but it is also a field of consciousness, the first entry point into our time matrix. When we get into the angelic human tomorrow, when we get more into the personal level, right now we're dealing with mass events and planetary information. We're dealing with the Templar, we're dealing with some agendas and those kind of things. Tomorrow we'll deal more specifically with the angelic human lineage, and we'll see how we incarnate down through those stages. We go into the sound fields and into the light fields. So the Brenau represent everything in this time matrix, everything in this 15-dimensional system, every life form. They represent the original three fields of consciousness, the original trinity of consciousness that we've all incarnated through in order to get here. And so if you can understand, when I talk about Brenau, it's not just some other group out there in the great beyond. It's not just some other group of ETs or angels or something like that. It's much larger than that. It's a consciousness field. There are three that form each time matrix, and we all emerge through them. So they represent our universal family of consciousness. Now, this is what the little info blurb is written on the Brenau orders. The orders refer to the different groupings of Brenau. In our universe, there are three primary Brenau orders that are light fields that set all of the other life forms, the consciousness for the life forms, into our time matrix in motion. So the Brenau orders are the eternal Rishi consciousness collectives that form the primal light fields and Brenau time cycles of dimensions 13, 14, and 15 of harmonic universes, or of harmonic universe 5, antimatter density 5. Now, harmonic universe, for those who don't know the concept, refers to, in a 15-dimensional time matrix, you have the dimensions broke down into 5 sets of 3 dimensions, giving you 5 interwoven yet separate 3-dimensional reality fields. We are in harmonic universe 1. When I refer to the term density 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it means the same thing. It's referring to that 3-dimensional system that has a particular density level of matter associated with it. So, bless you. Yeah. All right. So, the Brenau orders are, they call them Rishi consciousness collectives, in the primal light fields, the first cause light fields in our time matrix, from dimensions 13, 14, and 15, harmonic universe 5, density 5. The 3 Brenau orders of our time matrix are the universal families of consciousness through which all beings in our time matrix incarnate into the 4 lower dimensional harmonic universes and density levels. The 24 primary Brenau Rishi collectives in the energy matrix. Now, this statement here refers to there are 24 of them collectively in the energy matrix. Each group of 3 forms a time matrix within themselves. Okay? We actually exist within them. And when we expand back from being in human form, back into the next matter level of density, which is semi-etheric, and then back into etheric matter, and that back into pre-matter Christos, the next stage after Christos, after we get ourselves out of matter density, is going back in to being I am Brenau. All right? So we actually exist. Our whole reality field exists. And so does density 2, 3, and 4 within the reality field of density 5. The Brenau are the consciousness collectives that form that energy field. Okay. The 24 Brenau Rishi collectives in the energy matrix, that's a bunch of time matrices together, that serve as universal guardians and feed individuated consciousness into the time matrices of universal structure, are often referred to as the solar lords. The name Council of 24 Elders originally referred to the 24 primary Brenau collectives in the cosmic energy matrix. The term Council of 24 emerges in the Enochian material, and the Anunnaki also adopted it to represent a certain group of that has 24 basic subgroups within it that has to do with the Nibiruan Council. But the original meaning of the Council of 24 represented those 24 primary light fields, or Brenau Rishi collectives, that form the time matrices in our universe, or in our time matrix and others. Okay? It's small print. Yeah. Okay. Through the personal morphogenetic field, which is your template of manifestation, and auric field, every being in every time matrix, including each human, is directly, energetically connected to and exists as a part of one of the 24 Brenau Rishi collectives. The fact that we're here implies we are connected to them. The fact that anything is here means it's connected to them. You don't get here without that connection. They are part of the expansions of energy and consciousness that get you back into full at one with Source. And they exist within Source, and we exist within them. And we're like the small part, the little small circle in the center of a bunch of big circles. Okay. The 24 Brenau orders represent the universal family of consciousness through which we originally entered manifestation into the light fields of time, from what's called the Janus Ascended Masters consciousness collectives in the primal sound fields of the energy matrix. So when I'm doing a discussion, I'm talking about time matrix and energy matrix. You have Source, say as one big circle. Inside that, you have the energy matrix, which is a field of sound. It's also a field of conscious sound, because the energy that composes those units of energy that vibrate to form that sound field are conscious, are individuations of the consciousness of Source, as it first begins to individuate into smaller, externalized pieces of itself. Those fields of sound, the consciousness part of them, is referred to as the Janus, Y-A-N-A-S. Now, the words that are used here are words that are originally in the cloistered oratura plates. Okay, they were from the Anahazi language, which was a density 4, the first audible density 4 language, the first spoken, externally vocalized language in our time matrix. It was the language, some people call them angelic languages and those kind of things. There are many languages that emerged out of it, but the words that sound weird, like Brenau and all sorts of new words that you'll hear with this material, are the closest English translations to the original Anahazi language from the cloistered oratura plates. Okay, let's see. So the Brenau orders emerged out of the Janus Ascended Masters, which means beyond the time matrix, collectives in the primal sound fields. The Brenau Rishi work cooperatively to equally assist all life forms in fulfilling their purpose, their process of evolution to ascension. That is, the core purpose of evolution is eventually to ascend out of externalization and back into at-one-ment, where again you make a choice that you might want to experience being in density and individuation again. So yeah, really, after this one, yeah, oh, I go home and stay home for quite a while. Yeah. Okay. The three Brenau Rishi collectives have served under the guidance of the Emerald, Blue Flame, Grandianus, Janus Ascended Masters collectives from the energy matrix. I'm going to define that sentence before I go any further with it. Okay. See, when you read this, after you've read the other stuff that comes before it in the book, it'll make sense. When I say, when there's a concept there like, under the guidance of the Emerald, Blue Flame, Grandianus, Janus Ascended Masters collectives, that's a mouthful. That is the primary. When you have Source, the first individuation of sound field is referred to as the blue flame tone. When it turns into the light field, it becomes the emerald blue flame, or the first primary ray of creation. That is the first primary ray of creation. And it's you can't really see that color down here, but you can get close to it by imagining a very pale turquoise, light pale turquoisey blue kind of color. Okay, so when I refer to the Janus collective, remember the Janus are the consciousness collectives that form the sound part of the energy matrix, or the energy matrix, the sound matrix. Okay, the blue flame, or emerald blue flame, Grandianus, they call themselves the Grandianus, are the ones who are the consciousness that's associated with that first stage of individuation from Source, that first sound field within which all of the others take place. So the Brenau Rishi, in our time matrix and in any other, work under the guidance and direction of that primary consciousness collective. There are two other consciousness collectives, because the sound fields are divided into primarily three groups. You have the first unified group, which is the Grandianus, which is the emerald blue flame tone, because you're not dealing with light yet, you're still in tones. Then within that, the first level of polarization in the sound fields creates two smaller Janus groups. And we'll get into that. If I get into that now, I'll never get to the end of this. Basically, the other two groups, you have the blue flame sound tone Grandianus, and that breaks into two in the first polarization, creating what's called the gold flame tone Wachianus. They call themselves the Wachianus, and the violet flame tone, or it's really like pale violet magenta color. They're known as the violet flame keepers. The violet flame tone ones are called the Ramnianus. So these are the consciousness, the three primary consciousness levels of the sound fields that happen before the light fields happen, before manifestation happens. The data that the Voyager's material and everything attached to it, and anything that has the genuine Azurite name on it, anything associated with this material is coming from that level. It is coming from the Grandianus level. And all of the representatives they have all the way down in time. They step it down. They step the data down. They don't interact with this reality field all that often directly, unless it's extremely important. The Brenau don't interact directly and say, hello, we're the Brenau. You know, usually that's like once upon a millennium or a few billion millennium. They'll actually make direct contact and give data. They're doing it now because it's a crisis intervention problem that not only affects our system. If things go bad here, it's going to affect the Pleiades system, the Sirius star system, and the Arcturus star system, and all of the life fields within the densities that are part of those systems. For this reason, because of the events that we're in the middle of without even knowing it, are so... I'd say the consequences of the events we're in the middle of, consequences of them not working out well, could be very dire for this entire time matrix, which creates other problems for other time matrices within the sound fields. So this is why they're interacting with us. Okay, now to explain that what that concept of emerald blue flame Grandianus Janus Ascendus Masters Collectives means from the energy matrix. Okay, they are the guardians. The Brenau Rishi, 3 Brenau Rishi, have served under those guys. Okay, the blue flame guys, that have blue flame tone guys, as mediators, guardians, and protectors of the 5 harmonic universes in our 15-dimensional system since the creation of our time matrix. The Emerald Order, Brenau family, created the Elohai Elohim Founders Race, and the Gold Order, Seraphi, and Amethyst Order, Braharama Brenau orders. Wait a minute. Where did that sentence go? Wait a minute. I lost myself here. Wait a minute. This is so small. It's very hard to read. I'm supposed to have glasses, and I lost them. Okay, the Emerald Order Brenau family created the Elohai Elohim Founders Race. So when I talk about the Emerald Order, okay, now if it's a Brenau family, the word Brenau says first light fields. That means density 5, dimensions 15, 14, and 13. When we use emerald, amethyst, or gold, it's referring to the sound field that came out of. Emerald is the emerald blue. They can also call them blue, but they tend to go by the word emerald. It's like an emerald blue. That refers to the Grandianus, that first individuation of sound from source. So the Emerald Order Brenau are the light fields, the first cause light fields, that come out of the first cause Grandianus sound field. Okay? So the Emerald Order Brenau family created the Elohai Elohim Founders Race. That's one of the primary first race manifestations in density 4 in our time matrix. Okay? Let's see. The Gold Order... The Gold Order, Brenau, are the Brenau that correspond to that second polarization in the sound fields, which are the Wachianus level. The gold, they call them basically the gold flame tone, or the Wachianus collectives. And the Amethyst Order, or Violet Order, they usually use the Amethyst Order because the Violet Flame teachings have been really abused in recent times, so they don't want them mistaken. The Amethyst Order, Brenau, that are called, they're called the Braharama. That was their seed race. The Braharama, they have a lot to do with the evolution of Eastern philosophies, of Hindu philosophies and some of the Buddhist traditions originally. Okay? And all of that stuff has been distorted. Everybody's has been distorted here, not just the Christians, not just the Jewish people. Everybody's doctrines have been distorted. Anyway, so we basically have Emerald Order associated with Elohai Elohim Founders Race. That is the lineage that the angelic human lineage came through. We have Gold Order, which created the Seraphim, or the Seraphi races. Out of that, there was a group called the Fallen Seraphim that became the Draconian matrix. And that's in density 4, dimension 10. Draconian means density 4, dimension 10. And they created races from there that are roaming around, and some of them down here. The Elohai Elohim out of the Emerald Order were the group that the Anu Elohim emerged out of, and the Anunnaki races. It was a fallen group of the Elohai Elohim. So basically, what this stuff does, what this information here tells you, is basically there is source, there is a field of sound that is conscious. Those consciousness collectives are called yanas. There are three primary ones, three primary sound tones, tone fields. Grandayanas, Vachayanas, Ramyanas. Then that goes into the light fields of dimension 15, 14, and 13, and every time matrix will have a minimum of three, or groups of three. Brennau, or Brennau Rishi, or solar lords, whatever you want to call them, that are the consciousness collectives that hold the eternal primal light fields for that time matrix that everything else manifests within. So we have the Emerald Order, Brennau, the Gold Order, Brennau, and the Amethyst Order, Brennau. They are the primary collectives of light, conscious light, that we are all a part of, we all exist within. There's another group that wasn't originally part. I'm going to skip a lot of this because it just gets, well, actually, maybe I won't. I'm trying not to bore you with reading it because it's much slower than my usual bouncing around and just, letting it fly. But there's some things in here. I assessed some of the top stuff. I'm going to read a little bit of this so we understand a little bit about the orientation of each of those Brennau orders. The Emerald Order Brennau, the Emerald Order Elohai Elohim Brennau families from the Grandianas, Ascended Masters Yanas collectives, are the keepers of the emerald blue flame. They sustain the 48 Akkadic level ascension codes. Now, when we're in the sound fields, the word Akkadic refers to that first blue flame tone. Okay, sound field. Before we get to the light fields, it's called the Akkadic level of the energy matrix. It's the first individuation from source. It has 48 primary arrangements of scalar grids that actually get manifest within people's DNA templates, pieces of it. Our whole DNA template, any manifestation template, is built upon smaller collections of the scalar grids that form these primary sound fields. So the Emerald Order and their Elohai Elohim Brennau families, they sustain in our time matrix the full spectrum of the 48 Akkadic level ascension codes. They are the scalar wave patterns that once you're in this time matrix, you need to reaccrete or pull back into your manifestation template in order to get out of the time matrix, into the sound fields again, and then into full expansion to source. So out of 48 patterns of frequency that you need to accrete within your manifestation template and while you're still physical in the DNA, they hold the whole 48. So what they're doing is holding that primal sound field intact within the light field, so we have the bridge to get out of manifestation, so we can go back into a full ascension to at one-ment with source. And by the way, when I say at one-ment with source, I don't mean getting absorbed like a blob where you're no longer, you kind of think of that concept of being absorbed like a sponge absorbing water, and then you lose yourself once you're there. This bigger thing absorbs you. It's not like that. The idea of ascension is to be able to go into full expansion, back into source, while retaining your full memory of all of the identities that you had while you were in time. See, nothing is ever separate from source. If we got blown to space dust tomorrow, we're still within source, but our memory matrix that's held within those scalar wave patterns would also be blown apart. So we would be of source, part of source, and within source, but not have recognition of that fact. When a being comes into the time matrix and then gets back out through ascension, it retains its identity and awareness. It retains the identity and awareness of its individual selves, then itself as part of planetary identity, part of galactic identity, part of universal identity. It becomes a conscious co-creative force with God, rather than simply units of consciousness that the God force uses to create other things. So that is why it's worth understanding ascension, and it's worth caring about spirituality. A lot of people say, well, if I'm never separate from God, they get to the point of, okay, I'm created out of the units of the consciousness of God. Well, that means I'm never separate from God, so I don't have to worry about being spiritual, right? Just ignore it, it's already there, it's all here. I am God right now. There's a lot in the New Age movement doing this. Now, the I am teachings that say, I am God now. Well, yes, you are. But how much of that can you embody in the vessel you're carrying right now is the question. Because if you were fully God right now, you'd be able to take yourself right out of manifestation any moment you chose and come back if you wanted to. Okay, yes?
Is all of creation reflected within
Cathara grid or the double Cathara grid, and how would this be placed within that?
Okay, that we'll get into. Some of the diagrams help explain that. The book will explain that. If I went into explaining the Cathara grid right now, we'd spend another hour on Cathara and not get through the stuff we have to for this workshop. There are lectures and workshops on video that have been done specifically on Cathara, showing how the Cathara grid fits in with the 15-dimensional time matrix. I can refer you for that question. I'm going to ask, please, that we refrain from questions, because if I allow questions, we're going to be here till midnight just to get the stuff that I promised you on the flyer. But I take that question. So there is a page in here someplace that I can refer you to if I can find it real quick. Somewhere.
You have any more of those booklets?
Did you didn't get one? Oh, okay. Phil, are you around?
Yes.
Is there any more booklets? Are there any more booklets? I can't talk today. Okay. It's one, please. Actually, page 50B. It looks like this. Would answer that question. It gives you an idea of how the Cathara grid plugs into the 15-dimensional matrix. Okay, so that was to answer her question more than anything.
The sound,
Yeah.
first source, is that, where would that be placed?
Okay, I'll do this. It's probably a good question, because there may be a lot of other people that have that question. The one right on the front of your package is a 15-dimensional time matrix, and the three outer rings of that, you will notice they're called the triadic level, polaric level, and acadic level. These are the sound fields where the yanas exist. Out here. Then inside here, we get the 15-dimensional structure. Okay? So these are the sound fields. This field here would be the light field. And then these are the density fields. You have the sound field, the light field, the D12 level of entering into liquid light. So these would be liquid light fields. Then you have etheric matter, semi-etheric matter, and physical matter. Now, this doesn't show you the geometrical relationship that you could translate into number formulas. This shows you conceptually the relationships between the parts. Okay? That's what these diagrams are made for. Now, when you want to understand the Cathara grid, you can take that, and on that page 50B, I believe it was, it shows the Cathara grid. There's like 1.5 there, but there's actually supposed to be 2, but it doesn't fit in the diagram. That shows the basic points of where the 12 points in a Cathara grid. There's actually 2 Cathara grids between here and God, or the one from dimension 1 through 12, and then one from dimension 13 up through the acadic level. So you have 2 Cathara grids that plug in to the 15-dimensional matrix, the light and sound fields. And those 2 diagrams together illustrate those relationships. So I hope that will help. I want to get back to the Brenau quick so I can get beyond the Brenau and into back into where we left off, which was with Christ, Enoch, and Toth. Yeah, we will get back to them very, very shortly. But I wanted to clarify Brenau. I wanted you to understand, if possible, the significance of who these beings are. It's not just another ET or angelic group coming in to give their 2 cents. Okay, this is high-level stuff. It's important stuff. The only reason it's given to me is because I've had this contract for probably about 2 million years, and I've taught these things in other fields as well. I came in with my incarnational memory open this time. I didn't understand what I got myself into, but I had the running memory, and I had contact since I was in the womb. So this is not my work or my teachings. This is not something I try to convince you to believe in, because I need you to sustain what I think is true. I'm trying to get across the significance of who these beings are in relation to all of us. These teachings, they belong to all of us. So with the Brenau, we have the Emerald Order Brenau. They have the 48 acadic level ascension codes. They serve the primary guardians in our time matrix and are the charter members of a group called the Guardian Alliance and other Melchizedek Cloister Blue Flame service organizations. So down here in the New Age movement, there are certain affiliations. You have the Blue Flame groups. They are usually affiliated with us because there haven't been any of them on the planet for a long time. When we get into the others, I'll show you where that fits into the New Age movement a little bit too. Okay, now the Emerald Order, Elohai Elohim Brenau families, are the creators of the original Lyran, Syrian, Anahazi, Azarite, Oraphim, Turanisium, Adami Kudman, Christed, angelic human lineage. What that whole string of names means is coming down the densities to get into human form. There's a whole progression of different types of forms that we come down through, different race lines that build, I would say build up, but it's actually the opposite, that build down into the smaller genetic coding that is the human here. Okay, so our true lineage comes from the Emerald Order Elohai, Brenau, and it comes down through in density. There's a chart that shows this too. I'll let you look at this so I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. There's a chart that shows the families of consciousness somewhere in there. Phil, if you're out there, if you could help me look through these packs and find these quicker, that would be really helpful, because without two hands and the microphone in the middle, it's a little hard to do it quickly. The stellar races chart.
That's on 53A. 53A. Yeah, 53A.
Okay. All right, 53A. All right. This chart will show you basically the breakdowns from the Elohai and Seraphai family lines. They didn't get into, in this chart, we didn't get into the violet flame groups. That was information, then there's still a lot more to come on that. They have certain security contracts that information was not supposed to be released yet about them, the Braharamas, and we're just starting to get information on that. So that wasn't included in this chart, but this shows you at least the Elohai lines and the Seraphai lines, which are the Emerald Order and the Gold Order. They're the two highest lines. In a minute, all right, the Emerald Order Elohai lines are the ones that came out of the 48 code templates, the Akkadic code templates. Let's see, I'll finish up on the Emerald Order here and then get into the Gold Order. So when you see that chart, you'll know which one you're talking about. The first entry, the Brenau Emerald Order, goes with this side, with the left side, and the Gold Order goes with the right side. Okay. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so they're the creators of our original human lineage, which came down from, everybody entered through what's called the Cradle of Lyra in density 4. And it's associated with the Lyran star system here. If we look up and see the Lyran star system, you take that up to density 4. And that was the entry point where life was seeded 950 billion years ago into this time matrix. This time matrix existed long before that. But this was the last life seeding in this time matrix, and that's all we really need to worry about. 950 billion years of history is enough to deal with for a while. You know? Okay. So they created the angelic human lineage from density 4, Lyran, Anahazi race. Then the Anahazi race came down into density 3 into the Sirius star system, the Sirian star system. And this is Anahazi, not Anunnaki. Then in density 3 and 2, there was a combination race that included some of the higher codes of the Brenaus back in again with the Anahazi and created what's called the Azurite race. That's where the name Azurite Temple comes from. The Azurite race were on densities 2 and 3 of Sirius B, and they still are. Then the Azurite race was combined again with the Anahazi to form a race called the Oraphim. These were getting closer to the hominid forms that we have now. The Oraphim were seated in density 2 on Tara, but they are also able to migrate to density 3. So it's a form that can go between density 2 and density 3 and retain its biological integrity. The Oraphim race was the host race out of which the human lineage was, the coding, the different genetic codings that became the human lineage were seeded through the Oraphim race. So technically the human race is the Oraphim race, but in smaller form. When we get to be Oraphim again, our DNA templates are bigger. Now, the Oraphim DNA template has more than 12 strands. So right now, from where we are here, we're working on 3-strand capacity. Let's worry about the first 12. Get those activated. Then we worry about activating the rest of our organically human and more imprint. So out of the Oraphim came a race called the Turanicium. Again, when you see Tura, the word that resembles Tura, it usually refers to oversoul or ability to embody an oversoul. So the race was called the Turanicium because they could embody the oversoul and up to 12 dimensions of consciousness. It was the 12-dimensional angelic human pattern. If you read or have read the Voyager's Secrets of Amenti, Book 2, we get into explaining the Turanicium human lineage, and that at certain points on the planet called Tara, which is density 2 of Earth, there were digressions that happened in some of the Turanicium lineage. We did not come out of the digressions. We came out of the groups that were repaired back to their original full Turnicium form, they were called the Adami Kudman. This is where you get the Adamic races when the Enoch teachings talk about the Adamic races. So that whole line of Lyran, Syrian, Anahazi, Azurite, Orpheum, Turnicium, Adami, Kudman, Christed, angelic human prototype, that's what it's referring to. What a human is, coming all the way down the scale of density. This is important to know now, because right now, in the New Age movement, about 80% of the New Age movement is being run by the Anunnaki. Now, a lot of those Anunnaki were good guys. They decided they were going to honor the Emerald Covenant this time. In 1992, they made agreements to that fact, called the Syrian-Palladian Agreements. They agreed to help. They agreed to do co-evolution, not dominion. In September of this year, they broke those contracts. So it's extremely important right now that we realize who we are and where we came from and what we're affiliated with. Because what they have done every time that they have come and tried to take over here is they have tried to put themselves up as our creator gods and convolute the lineage that we came out of to make it look like we were ape forms here and they came in and genetically enhanced us, and we should really be thankful to them for making us the wonderful beings that we are today, which is an absolute and utter lie that's being promoted very heavily in the New Age movement right now, and that's going to become much, much more evident as the New Age movement progresses. We need to realize this, because what they're trying to trick us into is not knowing who we are. They're trying to say, oh, here, do this. There, your 12 strands are activated. See that? Now you're a 12-strand human. Because they already know, a lot of us have the idea that, wait, didn't we have 12 strands? They have 11-strand capacity, first of all. They don't want us to evolve 12-strand. They're trying to trick us into thinking we've activated 12 strands when we haven't. They're giving us partial ascension teachings that are twisted, so we don't keep looking, and so we don't listen to the Brenau. This is what's happening in this time matrix right now. This has happened in our history before, and that's why in the year 2000, a whole planet full of humans walks around not knowing where the heck it came from, what its history is, or what it means to be alive, or who God is. It's because they've tricked us before, and they've played these games before, every time there's a stellar activation cycle or the potential for one to happen. So this is why, when I spent some time on history and going through what seems like pre-ancient history, who cares, it's all over with. It's not all over with, it's repeating itself. We can make a difference this time if we're wise enough and we watch for the landmines. The landmines are planted all through the New Age movement right now, and particularly since that treaty was broken. I'll talk about the Treaty of Altair, it's called. I will talk about that later this afternoon. But I want you to understand, when I give you this information, it's so somebody here has the real truth before they contaminate the thought field out here so much that nobody is going to remember. I know these are the true teachings. I hope you can find that knowing. And it's not for me that I hope you find it. It's for you and for this race. Because what the Anunnaki are trying to do and have tried to do and have almost succeeded in doing is taking this race and hybridizing it out of the 12-strand potential so they can always remain in control. They don't have the 12th-strand potential because they severed their connection to their Christos template, because they don't want to be under the guidance of the Brenau. They don't want to apply the law of one. They're more interested in running control agendas in this time matrix. And 250 million years ago, they tried to take this time matrix over and have been trying to do it ever since. They're seed races. The Anunnaki race itself is not 250 million years old. Only their seed Anu Elohim races are. So when I'm bringing this data to you, it's very of the times. It's not ancient history that you can yawn and go to sleep and wake up when the next class is here. You know what I mean? I'm trying to help you, and they're trying to help us understand. And understand our lineage, the basic structure of which is on those charts. So when somebody comes up to you and says, oh yeah, the Anunnaki created a Sumerian history proves that, yeah, we're just little Anunnaki babies down here. Don't believe it for a minute. It is a lie that's being purposely orchestrated and run through the minds of innocent people down here. I mean, innocent as far as not knowing anything in this lifetime. Nobody's innocent down here. We all have huge amounts of data and memory of who we were before and who we are in other time spaces. But innocence, we're all innocent, even the ones that are running the con. But they're trying to con us right now. And if even little groups like this, 30 people here, 40 people here, start to get it and realize what's happening, there will at least be something that's preserving the original Emerald Covenant Freedom Agreement, where humans were created to be a divine angelic race, a guardian race, where humans have the chance to do that. Because if the Anunnaki have their way, they will take contemporary humanity and they will hybridize, and they will progressively mutate out the 12-strand capacity. That will give them hybrid races here that will progressively allow their matrix to incarnate into those body forms. And they get their presence on the planet, and they get what they wanted, control over its planetary Templar complex, because Earth has some key gates that go with the universal Templar complex. It's a big game we're in the middle of, and it's a very ancient game. Now, get back to the Brenau orders just a little, so we understand some interesting things. I found these interesting because they apply directly to the New Age movement. If you notice in the New Age movement or the UFO movement, there are beings of every shape, size, and form that are talking to people these days through channeling. You have cat people, dog people, snake people, I mean, all sorts of people that look like animals and things like that. Well, the basic forms for animal forms come out of stellar races as well. And there are certain forms that we are connected to. Now, this will help clarify a little bit of that when I read this. Okay. We're talking about the Emerald Order Brenau. They created the Lyran, Syrian, Anahazi chain all the way down to the Christed angelic human of Terra. They also are the creators of most hominid forms, or human-type forms in our time matrix, most feline and land mammal life forms. Okay, so they're associated with feline, that means cats here. It also means the leonines that are channeling through people from higher places. It also means they have some affiliation, obviously, with the Hathors, because the Hathors have something to do with cat people. Even the people who are studying, like the Egyptian, new Egyptian stuff coming out that gets into the Hathor race, they are a hybrid race. They're they're a third leonine, which is an Elohai, Emerald Order group, and a third Anunnaki, and a third Brahmarama. It was an attempt to give the Anunnaki a re-evolution program so they could regenerate their ascension codes. Okay, that's what Hathors are. So if we begin to understand the basic affiliations of form that go with each of these three Brenau families, you have basic human forms coming out of the Emerald Order, basic feline forms, a lot of the land mammal forms. When you see life forms here, animal forms, they're like us. They hold a part of that consciousness here. Just like there's fallen Anu Elohim. There are animals that incarnate out of that matrix. So we begin to understand the stuff around us more if we realize these simple affiliations of form. So you can basically say the cat people and the land mammals and the human forms, the hominid forms, came out of the Emerald Order. Then there's the Brenau Gold Order. They're out of the Seraphi matrix. They're, let's say, the second in charge in this time matrix. And in charge only refers to the level of frequency and consciousness carried within the light field that their Brenau represent. Okay? Everything is equal in worth. It's just not equal as far as its amount of frequency. But its worth is always equal in source, the smallest and the largest. Okay, now, the Gold Order, Brenau, create the Seraphi, which are called the Seraphim when they come into density 4. The Seraphim lines are out of the Vachayanas, Ascended Masters Collectives, and the sound fields. They are also charter members of the Guardian Alliance and other Gold Flame service organizations. Now, for one example of a Gold Flame, it's actually a combination of two right now. It started out as a Gold Flame service organization. It was a movement called Ekankar. They were originally out of that. They talk about the Sarah's races and those kind of things, which are some of the angelic type races that were created in the lower densities out of the Seraphim angelic collectives. So right now in contemporary, our contemporary belief systems, you can actually trace every one of the philosophies on the planet right now to one of these three affiliations or one of the fallen matrices out of those affiliations. Okay, so it's, stuff that affects our everyday life. It's right with us right now. Okay, the keepers of the gold flame, as the ones coming out of the Gold Order, Brenau, are called, the Seraphim, they sustain the 42 polaric level ascension codes. The 42 polaric level ascension codes refer to that second sound field. Okay, you have the first one's the blue, emerald blue, and then the second becomes the emerald blue, and then the second one is the gold, and then the smallest one would be the amethyst violet. So these guys have the 42 polaric level ascension codes. They hold them in time, in our light fields, in our time matrix, to keep them for any being that's in here, to be able to accrete them, to get out. Okay? They serve also as primary guardians in our time matrix, and they are also charter members of the Guardian Alliance and other Gold Flame service organizations. They are primary contributors to human evolution through their avian hominid Ceres races. Avian hominid, bird people, simply put. This is part of where our angel image comes from, the bird people. There were winged hominids. They came out of the gold order seraphim. And they literally had wings at some points in evolution. At other points, they didn't. So not all angels have wings. In fact, most don't. But if you see one that really has wings and it's not just faking it, it's probably out of the Ceres line. And there's also many lines that were non-winged, but the winged guys usually come out of the gold order. They also create most of the insect and reptile races, all the way down the chain. There are good insects and good reptiles, just like there are fallen ones. We have on this planet a problem with the draconian matrix, which is a fallen seraphim family, and they manifest primarily in reptilian-type forms, or reptilian hybrid forms. There are also a lot of problems with what I like to call the bug people. There are races, some of which are good, and some which are fallen, which means they're still good, but they have some real problems that they like to make other people's problems. We have a race called the Athian, which look like large white, large 12, 15 feet tall, praying mantises. But they're of density 3 and 4, so they're etheric matter density. A lot of people in the UFO contact movement have experienced contact with the Athian. The Athian are good guys, okay? They're on the good side. They're not out of a fallen matrix. They're trying to help the fallen races to get back their ascension codes and to start working in ways that are cooperative with everybody else. All right? Out of the same seraphim matrices, you have that created the Athian. There's a part of it that became fallen and associated with the draconian reptilian ones. They create some various different insect forms. The regalians are one. Now, there are regalians that are in the form of Zeta, the little grays. There are also regalians that are in the form of various hybrid strains. One of the hybrid strains is involved with a race called the Necromaton. We'll get into the Necromaton later, but these are out of the fallen hybridized matrices of the insect fallen seraphim, the reptile fallen draconians, and hybridized with the Anunnaki and the human pattern. So we'll talk about the Necromaton. The only reason I'm bringing that to our attention now is so you've heard the word in some context with the stuff we're talking about. Necromaton are known here as the Men in Black. They're on planet, and they're directing a lot of the Illuminati forces. And there's a real problem with them that emerged this September. So we'll get into that. That's why I wanted to bring that name up. So basically you have the Gold Order, and to put it simply, they do bird people, and primarily bird people, reptilian, and insect-type life forms, including the ones here that we call our little bugs and those kind of things. Now, when it comes to microbugs, things you see under a microscope, there's a whole different world. They can all be traced back to the 3 primary creation matrices, but it's not just as simple because, there's not necessarily, a bird microbe and a, cat microbe, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the visible forms that we can see, cats, birds, dogs, all that kind of stuff, these are the affiliations, the original matrix those forms came out of. So we are most connected to cats and birds, really, because our strongest imprints are the Emerald Order, and at certain points there was hybridization done to bring this race back into its angelic heritage at a couple points where the Ceres got involved, the Gold Order got directly involved and did some hybridization to bring our gene code back out. So we got some of the bird people connection there, too, in our gene codes. So we're most connected, not to pond scum and things that used to swim, and not to dolphins. Hate to disappoint all the Anunnaki teachings out there. But we're most connected to avian strains, bird strains, and primarily to cat strains. And if people tell you that we're most connected to the dolphins, I'll guarantee the Anunnaki told them that. Okay? Dolphins are nice people, I'm sure, but they were created originally out of the fallen Elohim matrix. But whales were not. So you can't pass judgment on, this whole set of species is terrible because it was out of a bad matrix. It's not about that. It's about just understanding the different connections and how they're manifesting right before us. So before you become a dolphin worshiper and that kind of thing, you might want to ask, where did it come from? Whose consciousness is it pulling into here? And do I want that consciousness to affect me in my gene code? There are some dolphin strains that have been brought back up and connected to other matrices. So you can't tell just by looking, but it helps to have an idea, especially in the New Age movement, because it is a sea of dolphins and light and love and all sorts of forms that just love you to death. Some of them are good, and some of them are still good, but trying to trick you.
Into what?
Hmm?
What are they trying to trick you into?
They're trying to trick us into helping them fulfill the agenda of hybridizing this race out of its 12-strand potential for one purpose and one purpose only, because they want the planetary Templar, because it has gates that connect to the central gates of this time matrix that can take them out of this time matrix and into others. If they could dominate this time matrix and get control of the Templar here, they would be able to force themselves into other time matrices and do the same. All right? So that's the motivation of the game for them. And the motivation of the game on our side is to realize it's a game, but a very serious one, but not one to be afraid in. If we remember who we are and reclaim our power from all the twisted ideas we've been given for the last many, many centuries, and are wise enough to say, hey, look at the data that's coming through here. Okay, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Does it resonate with me? Try to feel this. Who am I as a human really? If you try to find that, you will find somewhere in there, as a human, because humans, even if you're a human that's hybridized, like a lot of people look like human and they know themselves as human, but they actually carry partial Anunnaki or partial Draconian gene codes. That doesn't mean they're bad. It means they're in a human body, which gives them the potential to evolve beyond that matrix that they incarnated through, if they don't get hung up by that matrix. Okay? So if we can understand the nature of the game and realize that you're not going to settle for anybody saying, well, we created you. We were a lab experiment, and we created you. Don't believe it. This was an angelic race, and we're being asked to remember for our own survival at this point. If we do, we get the keys to the Templar back, as we were once intended. The Emerald Covenant gets fulfilled. Okay. Now, the one other group I want to talk about, actually there's two other ones, the Brenau Amethyst Order. These are the ones that was like, they gave me a bunch of the others because they were the most closely related to, as far as putting the human genome together. Those two groups have had the strongest influence. Then there's the other group, that's the Amethyst Order, and they're called the Brahmarama Brenau families. They're from the Ramianas, or the violet flame sound fields. They're keepers of the violet flame. That's what they're known as. Now, if you look around, there's a lot of teachings. You have Saint Germain teachings. You have the Ascended Master teachings coming up all over the place. Teachings of the violet flame, or the violet ray, they sometimes call it. Some of these are just fine. Some of them are from the Brahmarama. Others have been hijacked by the Anunnaki and are taking you someplace else entirely using those teachings of the Brahmarama. So the violet flame teachings you need to be careful of. It's not something you're going to be able to tell whether it's a good group or a group trying to mislead you until you really learn to feel it out. If you use the Maharic seal, that technique we did last night, if you get used to doing that to where you can do it fast, or even do the real short version where you throw yourself over to the Grail point and saturate yourself with the D12 frequency temporarily, and then try to use your own energy in psychometry. And if you have a book with some teachings, try to move your consciousness into it. Without reading it first. Just move your consciousness into it and feel it once you have the D12 frequency in there. And you will be able to get a feel. It will either go, and you'll feel an expansion, relaxation, if it's really Brenau teachings, or you'll feel resistance thing. Now, you might feel a resistance thanks to Brenau's teachings if you have implants that you don't know about. Etheric implants in the astral field. That's another issue. If you work with the Maharic seal, it will progressively, flame holders, and which are the Seraphim, have 42, and the Emerald Order Brenau collectives and their races carry strains of the 48 Akkadic codes. So it's not a pecking order, it's simply a frequency order. And if we can understand that, we can start to say when we come across teachings, and there's a lot of teachings, you'd be amazed out of what matrices they're coming out of, because they're taking good teachings and then they're giving them a twist that doesn't belong there. And you can only feel the twist if you start to learn to feel the energy signature under words. But you can develop the ability to do it. That way you'll be able to tell a real violet flame book from a violet flame book taken and twisted. Okay? And it's not just the violet flame movement. Some of the most pronounced and loved and cherished movements happening in the New Age movement right now have been infiltrated. And they're teaching 90% great stuff, and then putting a twist on it that takes you in a totally opposite direction, but you can't see it unless you understand dimensional structure and what energy is and running through the Templar and all of that. And they're taking advantage of the fact that we don't have the Templar mechanics consciously held in our mind right now. Okay, so we have the 3 orders of the Brenau, and then there's the 1 order. I'm not going to read this whole sheet because at this size print I'm going to go cross-eyed and it'll take me forever. I'm just going to give you a synopsis of it. There's a 4th Brenau order that doesn't really belong here. It's called the Brenau Ruby Order. Now, it belongs in the sense that it's really part of the Emerald Order, Elohai, or it used to be. I'm going to give you the story real quick, rather than in detail, but it will be in detail in the handbooks. The 3 Brenau orders, when they created the Emerald Covenant co-evolution creation contract to seed life in this time matrix, there were some problems in the Lyran star system at density 4, which is the avatar level, the liquid light beings. There was some code convolution problems, which means by combining things in certain ways too often, kind of like inbreeding, you start to get twists that didn't belong there. They started to do that, and their templates started to get damaged, some of them. And that created distortions in consciousness, where they began to develop warlike consciousness. That's where it started. It started in density 4. I mean, D12, you're fine. But D11 down, you can still have the polarity problems. Our whole time matrix started because, I mean, for 950 million years has been dealing with the issue of, a billion years, has been dealing with the issue of polarity. Now, the Ruby Order, Brenau, these guys are good guys, or they wouldn't be considered Brenau. But what happened was the Emerald Order, a group of their Elohai Elohim families, became convoluted, and they became twisted, and they literally changed their own templates. So they could no longer plug in to the Emerald Order Elohai. So they could have free reign and run energy any way they wanted to. And they were quite abusive of the time matrix systems in density 4 at the time. This group called itself the Anu Elohim rather than the Elohai Elohim. They called themselves the Anu Elohim, Anu. They were going to be a new race. They were going to reseed and take over this time matrix with only their own kind. This happened in Lyra. In the cradle of Lyra, there were 3 planets in density 4 liquid light, manifestation level, pre-matter. There was Stargate 12 planet, at its core was Stargate 12, which was called Aramatena. And that was the planet that the Elohai were seated on, the Elohai Elohim of Aramatena, out of the Emerald Order. Stargate 11 was in a planet called Avion, which was closely related to Aramatena. Avion was where the Gold Order began seeding some of their races, and so did some of the Elohai races. And then there's a planet called Vega that's still there. And that was primarily Brahmarama, which are the Violet Order, and the Gold Order. So you had 3 basic planets. You had code convolution beginning to happen on 2 of them, where there was starting to be polarity issues and conflict among them that was starting to threaten to break the Emerald Covenant co-evolution peace agreement. The planets themselves were very valuable because at their core were the stargates that connected this matrix fully to the Brenau and the Janus levels to source. If you want to take over a time matrix, you want to sever that connection so you can go run around and suck energy off stuff that's around you and just run things the way you want to without having any having any immediate consequence or somebody telling you, no, you can't do that. The beings of the Elohai Elohim, not from Aramatena, but the ones from Avion, became code convoluted. And I want to tell you this story just a little bit because it comes down to something interesting that will be a relief to know where it came from. They became concerned about the what became later the Draconian races. They were actually the Seraphim races from Vega. They were afraid they might break the Emerald Covenant. They asked the Elohai Elohim of Aramatena to destroy the Seraphim races of Vega, and we said no. We said no because it would violate the Emerald Covenant to do that. If something was falling and having a problem, you were supposed to help it, not kill it and annihilate it, not blow it back to space dust, because the Brenau would not intervene and destroy the fallen Seraphim races that they were starting trouble, but they weren't doing anything near what this group of fallen Elohai did, because we wouldn't get rid of the Draconian, what became the Draconian races. We wouldn't get rid of the Vegan, the planet Vega people. They destroyed Aramatena because they wanted to blow the Stargate so the Brenau could no longer interact with our time matrix. This was known as the original sin. When the Bible and all religious teachings talk about the original sin, every human is imprinted with the original sin, well, I tell you, it's not just humans. It's everything in this time matrix for 250 million years, which is when this happened, a billion years, 250 billion years ago, this happened in Lyra, way before humans were even created as the human form. The original sin was the mark of not having the D12 gate functioning. Without the D12 gate functioning, you could not, in a biological form, once you were in here, you were stuck. You couldn't fully access the Christos template, the D12 template, because your DNA template couldn't hold the template because the time matrix didn't hold it. That's been repaired since then. But this was where the original sin came from. This is where the original mess of a drama in our time matrix came from. It was from that original problem in the Lyran system with those three races and the portions of them that became convoluted. And they're still at it today, and we're still right in the middle of the drama today. Okay, so the ruby order is what I'm trying to get to explain is the Elohai, Elohim that fell, became the Anu Elohim. They're associated with Avion, which is also blown up, because as soon as they took out Aramatena, gate 11, the ones on Vega, which were the fallen seraphim, took out Avion and took out gate 11 because they wanted control of the time matrix. So it was like a chain reaction thing. Both of those gates have been repaired since that time. But the ruby order emerged as the groups. We had the fallen Anu Elohim, and many billions of years later, when it came down to the Emerald Order groups, we're going to create a new species to come in and serve as guardians to get this time matrix put back together before it imploded itself, because there was so much damage being done to the stargates, it was going to literally implode itself, and all the consciousness here would be blown back to space dust. The human lineage was created to do that, and in retaliation, or in anticipation, because they actually threw them in a little bit before we got to the Turanicium human stage, the Anu Elohim from Avion created the Anunnaki race using a hominid type form. But it's actually a water hominid type form. It's more like a water mammal, kind of like your Ben from Atlantis, the old TV show where there was this guy that literally lived underwater and breathed water. They were kind of like, sort of like fish beings, but they were human-looking to a degree. They actually went through a human and reptilian type stage. They have some of the reptilian coatings, the Anunnaki, but they were created as an avenger race to make sure that the Brennau did not get control over this time matrix again, so they could feed off the consciousness that was trapped here. Because when you sever your connection, if you have a bunch of scalar wave grids that connect you to Source, into the Brennau, into the Ionis, and then fully into Source, and you sever that, it's like a pillar of frequency. You cut that at any point, you don't get. It's like moving your pillar of light out of alignment with the primal perpetual source of light. You become finite. This is what they did to themselves when they cut themselves off from their Brennau collectives. The Anu Elohim became a finite race, so did the fallen seraphim. A finite race, on that level, knows it's finite when it does that. But it also knows that it can sustain itself if it can continue to absorb and feed energy off of other life forms, which is a violation of the right of being of other life forms. But this is what they did. So these fallen races, it's not that they're bad. We don't even use the term evil, because we all have to heal this eventually. Everybody's got to get healed because we're all part of the one. But it is helpful to understand what it means to be fallen. It means your pillar of frequency is disconnected, and you will be finite until you're reconnected to the perpetual supply. They began feeding off the life forms in this time matrix. They wanted to close the higher stargates so they could have the whole matrix to themselves and just feed off the other consciousness that was here and just continue to reseed. What they would do is they'd seed a race onto a planet, use that race, the little bodies running around, to suck energy from the planetary grids up into their own matrix, and then they would destroy the race and just like let it de-evolve until it was gone. They could literally take the life force out of planets and stars that way. All right, so there was a whole complex series of very not nice things to do that were being run by the fallen seraphim and fallen Anu Elohim. All right, now the ruby order emerged from a group of Anunnaki and affiliated races that realized what had happened. They realized the burden of the original sin that they carried, and they couldn't remember, because if you don't have the DNA code to plug in the 12th strand or its subharmonics, you will not feel Christos unity consciousness. It will be like a concept out here to you. I don't feel it. You know? Human beings, because they can carry some of that subharmonic, can get a feel for the presence of the Christos and the connection to the source. But the Anunnaki couldn't, because their biology blocked it. There was a group of them that at least, they're highly developed intellectually, by the way. They developed where they realized what had happened, at least in intellectual terms. And they said, we want to change this. We see that this is a no-win game. And they wanted to change. So they asked for help from the Brenau orders to establish a way that they could re-evolve. There were a number of different hybridization type programs run. This was before we down here were into the game where we had to worry about it. But there were races created like the Hathors and a number of others to assist the Anunnaki consciousness that was stuck in Anunnaki bodies that wanted out and wanted to ascend, to know what that meant, to remember what it means to be a part of Source. They allowed them to get back the codes enough where they could plug in to the smallest of the 3 light fields, which happens to be the violet flame. Now they originally, from the fallen they went from Elo High, which was the highest light field, fell into the Anu Elohim and got totally distorted, but then they wanted to come back up and reascend to get themselves back in alignment with Source and with the nature of true existence. They did what's called a host matrix. They didn't have enough frequency for their biologies or their consciousness template to plug into the Elohai family like they used to be able to, because they lost so many of those frequency or scalar patterns. So what they did was plugged into the smallest light field, which is the violet flame Brahmarama light field. So right now, you have the violet flame Brahmarama light field in the Brenau of the amethyst order. They agreed to serve as a host matrix for this smaller order that's called the ruby order, and it has to do with what frequencies they can carry in the DNA template, as far as the amethyst, ruby, all that kind of stuff. The ruby order are the fallen Anu Elohim and their Anunnaki races that decided they wanted to come back into ascension, and many of them did, and they evolved into a small Brenau within, it's still placed within the Brenau of the amethyst order. And they're working their way back into the Elohai Emerald Order, but they're not there yet. Interestingly, and so they are considered, they're not an Ascended Masters group. You'd have to be a Janus to be that. But they are a small Brenau group that's part of a larger primary Brenau group that is trying to evolve any beings in this time matrix who came out of the fallen Anu Elohim matrix. So they're part of the Emerald Covenant. They're agreeing to try to help the Anu races, the Anu hybrid races down here. What's interesting is you'll find names associated with them that would surprise you. Part of the Ruby Order that's manifesting itself and has been trying to help humans here legitimately for a number of years now is called the Great White Brotherhood. That still implies Anunnaki, but it implies Anunnaki, Anu Elohim, that have already got enough coding back where they can do ascension. They have a specialized group of teachings that they use for races that have the coding that needs that particular host matrix. So their teachings are a little bit different than the Gold Order's teachings, than the Amethyst Order teachings, or the Ruby Order teachings. That's also the matrix that the Anunnaki that are resisting this, that are not in good standing, that don't want to be in good standing, are abusing those teachings. They're taking them because they can access them, because they have the Anunnaki similarity in their templates, so they can pull information and data from there. So this is why, in the Ruby Order, you'll have a lot of false violet flame teachings coming through them. It's not the Ruby Order themselves that are doing it. It's the ones that aren't connecting to the Ruby Order, but there's enough connection where they can intercept their transmission patterns when they're transmitting data, and they can take it and twist it and use it the way they want to fulfill the Anunnaki agenda. So that's how these twists come into the New Age movement. This is the start of where all of this has happened. What we're walking around in the middle of right now, there is a rhyme, a reason, a plan, a purpose behind all of it. And all of it is not in particularly divine right order, other than the fact that everything is always in divine right order because Source, God, allows all. Now, true divine right order we'll get into tomorrow, because we're going to talk about what is divine right order. And it has an energetic equivalent in the human body, in a planetary body. It's about having your scalar grids lined up all the way so you can fully embody as much as possible that consciousness of Source. Okay? We'll talk about divine right order tomorrow. I just wanted to give you the data on the sound fields, the light fields, and the consciousness that goes with them. Okay? We have the 3 Brenau orders and the 1 surrogate Brenau order. Yeah.
Okay. The
The Brenau Ramyanas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any information to read about about that other than your books? Or is that like old ancient teachings?
You know what's funny? I see. I don't read. I am not well read purposely in the New Age material or any of the stuff that's coming out. All the stuff I get comes directly through from the Cloister Door tour plates. But what I find is people come up to me and say, "Wow, they talk about the Ramyanas here. Did you know that?" Huh? No. You know, I have no idea what's out there, but I have heard that there are other teachings that refer to them. In fact, Phil had found, yeah, they're violet flame. And they're not in competition with each other. Whenever you find violet flame teachings, and I'll tell you, this is a trick. I watch this happen a lot in workshops when I'm just doing general public workshops where you never know who's going to walk in the door and what they're connected to or what's messing with them. The way people respond to these teachings tells me a lot about what's moving them in their fields. Because people that have a real problem with some of this, they have to really defend the fact that we're Anunnaki children, who might be helping them to feel that strongly? It might be the fact that you are part Anunnaki. Anunnaki incarnate into human forms, ideally, so they can get their 12th strand back so they can ascend, not so they can get hijacked by the matrix that was fallen that they incarnated out of. This is why there's distortions being done here. It's really a battle for who's going to control the energy of the consciousness on this planet and who's going to control the planet and its stargates. It's an ancient, ancient drama that we are in a position to help solve if we wake up. A lot of us won't. A lot of us will hate my guts completely. She's the devil, she devil, you know, because I am teaching you something that defines the life of Anunnaki history and the Sumerian stories that have been coming up through the twisted violet flame teachings. Okay? Because I will stand against draconian teachings that are twists. What happened when I talked about Enoch before, when he was imprisoned in the temples, what they did with some of the stuff that he had brought through was the draconian races got a hold of it and created what's called the Enochian watchtowers. They are twisted translations of Enoch's translations of the Cloister Door tour plates. And they became associated with the teachings of the Thule Society, which had to do with Hitler's movement, all of that. And they became involved with the people who were doing the Montauk Project up here and the human Illuminati, draconian Illuminati that are running around. So I am basically not well liked among any of the matrices that... At this point, yeah. That's why they're bringing back the plates themselves to get new translations.
Are the discs
The same discs, yeah. When I don't talk much about my own story because there's more important things to talk about, basically. But I saw these discs when I was 7 years old. I was taken into the inner earth portals under Kauai when I was 7 years old, and that's where my training began. And I've held these discs in my hand. And they trained me how to make them levitate and how to run energy through the body. It was fascinating. And I was not allowed to talk about it until I hit adult age because they said, if you talk about it, they will harm you. Which, you know, imagine a kid saying, you know, Mommy, they just took me, like, you know, down there in their whole, I'm playing with these discs that, like, make holographic pictures. Off to the psychiatrist you go, kind of thing. So there's a lot of data on, you know, on the personal stuff that I don't get into. But I want you to realize that these plates are real. They're on planet, well, not exactly. They are brought to the planet when necessary for training someone. There are 3 speakers contracts. I had one because of my incarnational history. There's another person in this room who has the other. There was another person who originally had the other one who was infiltrated by the draconian matrix, and he's been taken down. I won't put his name on video, but I will point it out later because it has to do with Slam Anna Hayes campaign that's going on the internet. He's running it. Yeah. So the name isn't important. Anyway, I'm going to get back on track, so when we take our break, at least I've accomplished something besides standing still in the same place I was when I wanted to pick up before. There's so much data that I want to get across to you, and the reason there's so much this time is we're on what's called 911 alert. Okay? I think there's a lot of other things. I'm getting guidance that in about 10 minutes we'll probably do maybe a 10-minute break. Then before I do that, I want to give you something to think about. And I'm getting guidance now to throw this in here before everybody's too tired and before you get so saturated with data that this part won't stick. The reason this workshop is taking place, and I've been asked to conduct it, and the reason I've been asked to bring out this information is because there was something called the Treaty of Altair that was formed. It was an agreement that was made between certain Anu forces, Anunnaki forces, and the Emerald Covenant forces. Now, when I say forces of the Emerald Covenant, they're the ones that are out of the Emerald Order, but they're also the ones that are out of other orders that are supporting the Emerald Covenant coevolution agreement, and they do not want harm to come to humans or anyone else. All right, the Treaty of Altair was a result of a very long-standing problem, and this takes me back to what I was talking to you about before. In 22,500 BC, when Thoth got involved and all sorts of things began to happen that weren't supposed to. During that time, the Matrix and the Nibiruan Council that Thoth was a part of were part of something called the Alcyone Council, referring to the star Alcyone in the Palladian galaxy. Alcyone is gate 5 in the interdimensional Templar complex, the universal Templar complex. Our sun is gate 4. Okay, and Earth is gate 3. So there's been this long historical interrelationship, who's controlling which gates, and that determines what happens on the planets surrounding them. Now, since 22,500 BC, when there were problems with the portion of the Alcyone Council that was affiliated with the Nibiruans and the Anunnaki races, they rebelled, and they decided they wanted to use Earth as their hybridization zone, and they attempted to take over this planet. Because they had been entrusted as part of the Emerald Covenant before, and to be fair to them and to be equal to them, even though they were Anunnaki strains, they had proven themselves for many centuries, the Brennau had given them partial control over Gate 5 as guardians and Gate 4. When they rebelled, they took Gate 4 and shut it down completely, which totally began control of the Earth systems. And they tried to manipulate as much as possible Gate 5. They can only block part of it, but they would try to do that. That's how Nibiru and the Anunnaki races began to really infiltrate here in 22,500 BC. Now, bring it all the way up to the present time with a lot of other things that happened in between that we'll talk about some of. The most important thing is the Treaty of Altair and what that means to our current times. The Treaty of Altair has to do with agreements that first began in 1992 between the Alcyone Council and its portion of the Alcyone Council that is affiliated with the Anunnaki and Nibiruan legions is called the Council of Nine, and some of them have adopted the name Council of 24 because they're trying to hijack that concept into their own twisted meaning, which really it refers to, the 24 Brennau, okay? The Council of Nine are the ones who have Gate 4. They still have Gate 4. Then they have part of Gate 5. We're going into a stellar activation cycle, which means those gates have to be opened, or it throws the place into pole shift if there's any coding problems. So when it looked like, in the early 90s, it looked like this was going to work, and there was going to be a stellar activation cycle, the Brennau orders asked, had convened meetings on various density levels between the Anu Elohim, between any of the races that would communicate. Say, look, it's not going to do anybody any good if it goes bad down there. Because if it goes bad, it's going to take out part of the Pleiades, which is going to affect some of the Anunnaki strongholds, and it's going to take out part of the Sirius system, which is going to affect some of the Anunnaki strongholds. So guys, don't you think it's worthwhile to cooperate? At first, it sounded good. The Anunnaki races did not think we would actually consummate a stellar activation cycle, a full stellar activation cycle, where the grid's open on a 12-code pulse, where it would bring the restatement of the Emerald Covenant back to Earth, and the opportunity to run the Templar would be given to human beings. That they didn't count on. In 1992, in November, I believe it was, 1992, they made agreements. There was the Sirius Palladian agreements, and you can find this in the Galactic Federation's work. They talk about the contracts and treaties and agreements they made to help Earth, through the next cycle of light that's coming, in all their terminology. That was when, now part of this was the Thoth Matrix. Thoth was going to help. It's going to be on the good guy team. We had Thoth, Galactic Federation, Ashtar Command, the Archangel Michael Matrix, and several other very prominent movements in the New Age movement were part of what's called the Palladian Nibiruan Council. They were going to help us They were working with the Emerald Covenant. They were going to assist this race. As of 1992, that was it. They had been running control games here. They had not been fair. The one thing they really didn't want to happen, though, was for the Emerald Covenant to come full swing, where humans would be offered the opportunity to reclaim their role as guardians of the Templar. The big thing they didn't want was for us to find out what they did. And part of the Emerald Covenant promise of the Brennau was to give back the Cloister d'Or plates that held the history. And if we got that history, we would see what those races tried to do to us. And if they tried to come in here and be our saviors, our angels, and our buddies, we'd tell them to take a hike and give them a heck of a time fighting it. They still want to control the Templar. Some of them are willing to settle for partial, for half control. Because the Emerald Covenant of 248,000 years ago, when it was restated, said, okay, we'll evolve both races. You have your Anunnaki hybrid races here now, even though they didn't belong here in the first place. But they're here if they will work peacefully and enter the Emerald Covenant. When it comes time for Earth's Templar to be turned back over to the human lineage, it will be turned over to both under the direction of the Azarites of Sirius.